All right, hey, what's up, guys? We have Derick here. He is a film critic. So, what's going on, Derick? How you doing tonight?
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
No problem. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself again?
Yeah, yeah,
Since
yeah. Take two.
yeah.
Yeah. So like I was saying, like we were saying, I'm a film critic. Work freelance. And I also am a film podcaster. So I do some stuff like my podcast is called Underrated, where we look at underrated film stuff that kind of needs more attention. And then I also write for websites like Watch Mojo, usually about film, but about all kinds of pop culture stuff. So that might be where people have seen a majority of my work is on Watch Mojo, but definitely should check out my podcast too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I was, gonna say last time, I've definitely heard of Watch Mojo. So, if you're writing on there, that's pretty cool. I mean, I think that I've only just seen their YouTube channel. I don't
Yeah,
think I've
yeah. So
really
yeah,
read
I
anything
write I
from
write
it.
the videos for the YouTube channel essentially.
Okay. So that's pretty cool. Do you get like paid for that?
I do, yeah, yeah. I work
That's
freelance for
cool.
them. Yeah, so I'm not like an employee or anything. It's like a freelance gig, pretty much that I'm doing.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so I've actually always wondered. I've always thought, I think, being a film critic would be like one of the perfect jobs, just being able to watch movies and write about them. But with that being said, I know how hard it is to critique movies. It's not easy. I've This podcast, actually, I think I told you off the podcast that this
Mhm.
podcast started as like a movie, kind of quote unquote movie podcast. Me and my friend were just shooting the shit about movies and other stuff. But when it comes down to it, if somebody asks you, so why do you like this movie or why not? It's very kind of hard to capture what's good about a movie and what's bad. So that is definitely something that I want to get into with you.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, yeah, because it is my background is in literature and as well as acting, because I was in theater or in college. I studied theater and English and English lit, I should say. So my kind of background is came from like observing literature and plays and stuff like that. And I've always been a really big film fan, so that's what I kind of wanted to apply that stuff to. So I might not be the best at looking at things from like a technical angle, might be not be able to tell you what lens anyone used in a particular film, but when it comes to story conventions and character arcs and uh, motivations and things like that, I think that's right in the sweet spot for me.
Yeah. So, what are some examples of movies that are just bad? Actually, let's go over the Oscars. We were talking about the Oscars before, and then I'll get into this. I don't want to. So yeah, like I said before, and then we got cut off. But I don't even really know if I know what the Oscar contenders are. I know like Everything Everywhere All at Once is a high one. I haven't seen that, even though I'm super into A24. It just doesn't look good to me. I hate
You got to see it, man. You got
I
to see it.
I really hate to say this because I know it's going to sound terrible, but it's like I just haven't really been fully able to get into those like Asian movies, like when the other one won a couple years ago, and it has nothing to do with the fact it has nothing to do with me not liking Asians, but it's like and I don't even know how much this one is like subtitled or whatever, but like
Well, it's
with the
not. It's an
other
American
one,
film. It's an
okay,
American
it's
film.
it's
Like
it's an American
Parasite, which
film.
is what I think we were talking about,
Yeah,
is a Korean
Parasite.
film, and I know that that is an obstacle for a lot of people is subtitles, and I get that it's something that I I try to like rally against it, but this one, if that is an obstacle for you, this is not a this is not a this is not a quote unquote Asian film. And it does have Asian American characters in it, and James Hong, who is like a I on all and like I think and all these characters who and actors who were originally from Asia but who have lived in America for many many decades, and it is made by the Daniels, the two directors. One is Asian American, one's a white guy or Jewish guy. So it's an American film, with a story about immigrants, certainly. But it is I wouldn't really say it's fair to compare it to something like a Parasite or even something like this year, which was another film out of Korea by Park Chan-wook that I liked a lot, which was Decision to Leave. This is a very, very different film than a lot of those kind of foreign films that you would compare it to.
Yeah, and yeah, once again, it has nothing to do with me. I'm not liking Asian people or
Yeah.
whatever. I'm totally, nothing like that. But I think some of the, I don't know, it's the subtitles and some of the culture stuff. I don't get like the references or whatever. But like Squid Game was another one. I actually watched all of Squid Game and I actually enjoyed Squid Game, so that is one that I did like. But with that being said, it's most of them aren't necessarily my cup of tea. But so there's
Yeah,
everything
I'll
everywhere
just
all
I'll
at
just say real
once.
fast. This is definitely the honestly All Quiet on the Western Front, which is a foreign film subtitled German, based on a German book. Obviously, is a lot closer to something like a Parasite than Everything Everywhere All at Once is.
Yeah, the problem with everything everywhere all at once is it looked kind of I think the best word would be like goofy, maybe, to me, like kind of like silly, like. And I'm really just going off of the trailer, so I have no right to say anything negative about it at all. But if it comes off like silly or goofy, or I don't know, I really do have to, honestly, you're right, I do have to watch it, and then otherwise I should just shut my mouth and not say anything about it. But I mean, obviously it must be a really good movie because I know a ton of people like it. But I also know that a lot of people, a lot of like A24 people, or just people in general, are kind of torn on it. Like I know, like probably half the people love it, half the people, maybe it's probably more like 75% of the people love it and 25% of the people don't. But so yeah, what else is also, we were talking about Top Gun before and also Avatar. I considered seeing Avatar and I chose not to. I didn't like the first one, but I was like, it's James Cameron and it's like maybe he'll, you know, the CGI or whatever he's doing will be so good. But
Hmm.
so yeah, what else is in the top 10? Is
So
Top
yeah,
Gun one of the best film contenders?
Top Gun, yeah, is nominated for a bunch of Oscars, including Best Picture, as is Avatar. So those bomb, big budget movies are definitely represented in a way that I feel like they haven't been in years past at the Oscars, at least not in Best Picture. That's something that I feel like since probably about 2003, when the Return of the King won, that was the last time a really big budget movie won Best Picture. And since then, the Oscars have kind of gone more indie and independent and smaller budget, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but when that's all they're recognizing, it is a bad thing when they are excluding these big movies that make a lot of money that are also really great. And you've really, in past years, especially with like streaming and everything, and just the gulf that is coming between these big like multi-million dollar budget movies, multi-$100 million budget movies, I should say, and like the kind of smaller A24 neon smaller studio type movies, is the gulf is increasing. And this year I think was a really strong year for movies, not only for the big blockbusters, which I'm glad they're getting represented, but also for, of course, those indie movies, those smaller ones, stuff like Banshees of Inisherin or Women Talking, and then also the kind of mid-budget movies, which have in large part been disappearing. They have been, there's lots of ways for filmmakers to still make the small budget movies, and there's lots of ways for filmmakers to make these big movies that they will like know will just dominate the box office. But the path of like making your money back on something where you spend 40 to 60 million dollars is becoming more and more difficult, which is another reason I am glad that Everything Everywhere has had the sustained success that it has, because that is one of the few mid-budget movies that is actually doing really well. And I think we need to continue to support cinema like that, because it is becoming more and more rare, as it's becoming just, movies are just becoming just the extremes of small budget or big budget. There needs to be still a middle path. And this year, I'd say the crop of nominees that we got not only are diverse, but they're also really good. I would say compared to the 10 nominees we got last year, they're a lot better this year. Just in my opinion, I'd say at least 8 of them are really very good movies. I think that even Avatar, which I didn't love the first Avatar, I think this one's a lot better And I also just want to mention that I do like the rule change the Oscars had with the rules for Best Picture, which it used to be originally was 5, and then it was 10, and then after 1 year of 10, it was between 5 and 10, and that's why a lot of years you got like 8 or 9 or 7 movies, but now they changed it back to a mandatory 10, so we did get 10 nominees, so everything has to be represented, or there is more representation, I should say, and you're getting 5 movies that you would not have gotten in like 2008 or something.
Yeah. So what are the 8? We got Top Gun, Avatar, Everything Everywhere All at Once, Banshees of Inisherin. Is that war movie on there? The
Yeah, All
Netflix.
Quiet, which is the
Oh,
German war film we mentioned, is also nominated. Women Talking, Tar, which is a really interesting movie. I think it's maybe that is kind of the critic darling. I liked it, not as much as everyone else. Triangle of Sadness, which I really like the first 2 acts, but it falls off a bit at the end, and then Elvis. So yeah, there's a full 10 this year.
okay. The only one that I can talk about is Elvis because I literally just finished it last night, and I liked it, and I thought the directing was really good. The cinematography, he does a lot of like cool shots, as you know. I'm forgetting his name. I know
Baz
his
Luhrmann.
name. Yeah, exactly. Baz Luhrmann with all. I mean, Romeo and Juliet. I actually watched Romeo and Juliet somewhat more recently, not the whole thing, but a part of it, and it kind of came off a little goofy to me. But I remember the first time I watched it, I'm really impressed with how he like mixed the old school thing with the new school thing, and even with Elvis, he did that a little bit. There was a couple scenes with like rap music in there that I thought was cool, like more modern rap. So Elvis overall was like, in my opinion, was pretty good, but by the end, I wasn't super impressed, and I was hoping he would go a little bit more into like the dark side of Elvis towards the end in Vegas, which he did go over, but I don't know. When it ended, I wasn't super happy. I'd probably give it like a 60 or 70 if I had to rate it on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
What did you think about Elvis?
Elvis was actually really the only Best Picture nominee that I did not flat out did not like. Like from this
Okay.
year, I really don't like that movie. Baz Luhrmann, sometimes he's really hit for me. I love Moulin Rouge. I thought his adaptation of The Great Gatsby, which is my favorite book, does a lot of the same things you're talking about with, incorporating the modern music, like rap music, the XX stuff like that in that film. That I have some issues with Gatsby, but I really like I did not love Elvis. I get why it's getting the recognition at the Oscars because the voters love biopics. They love musical biopics, especially these musicians that were very popular when a certain age range that has dominated the Oscar voters for a long time kind of crops up. So, I get why people like it. I'm glad that it made a lot of money because it was a relatively big box office movie. And one thing that it had in common with the other 2 big box office movies on here is that it had really good legs. And what I mean by that is it opened okay, but it just had really big staying power. It stayed in theaters for a long time and people kept going back to the theaters. And that's something that also happened with both Top Gun and with Avatar. And I think one of the things that has been maybe a red flag with some of the movies this past year is that they will just open huge numbers and then fall off a cliff, like take a 70% dive in its second week. And these movies had and part of that's because they skew a little bit older with their audiences, but they have been able to sustain that box office. And rather than just being you got to go opening weekend event, it's more of like, okay, you can go to see this movie in the 3rd or 4th or whatever week.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like I said before, I didn't see Top Gun, but it sounded from what everybody I talked to, they liked it, and it sounds like it was Tom Cruise's kind of like big, I would say comeback movie, but I mean, obviously he's been in a lot of movies since the first one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's actually been some time though since he's been in a really good movie, right? I mean, what was his last big good movie?
Whenever the last Mission Impossible was, I think I can't remember what year that one was. it might have been 2018, the one with Henry Cavill in it. I'm spacing on the name. The names all kind of run together on those Mission Impossible movies. But I think Tom Cruise is interesting because I think he's an actor who is, like, regardless of what I think of him personally, I think he's a very, very talented actor who has, when he's tried to branch out and do these more interesting roles, has kind of been rebuffed by the Academy and even critically sometimes, when he does stuff like Magnolia, or where he tries to stretch his acting legs, and now he's just kind of like shifted into, he's the guy who's going to do all the action scenes and jump and run the fastest and do all these insane stunts and kill himself for these movies. And I would really love to see him do something again like Collateral, which is absolutely one of my favorite performances of all time. Is
amazing. Yeah.
He's so good in that. Maybe my favorite Michael Mann movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I would, so he's in a weird space. But I do think that it is important to have, figures like him, and, regardless of what I think of, like these movies that come out and are helping to kind of push cinema forward and making sure that people actually, these events that people can go and see on the big screen. Because I'm really glad I got to see that one on the big screen. Top Gun wasn't my favorite movie of the year, but I did enjoy it a lot seeing it in the theaters.
Yeah, Top Gun is one of those movies that no matter how good it is or how good people tell me it is, and I was saying this before too, I just feel like I'm kind of like somewhat of like a contrarian maybe when it comes to movies. And it's like with, you mentioned Mission Impossible, it's just like I will not get into that movie no matter how good it is. Same thing with Bourne Identity. I can't stand when, and I have like honestly like a really big issue with this, is with Mission Impossible type stuff. They made like 8 or whatever, or 6. It's like it just gets to a point where it's like, you guys are obviously just trying to make money off this. They might be well done, they might be even well directed, well done, well acted, but it's like, I don't know. I'm just not really into the whole like sequel or whatever, after sequel would be like. Same thing with Fast and the Furious. Same thing with The Rock. Like I don't like The Rock. It's like I just don't, like, you know what I mean? And it's like I will. Same thing with Marvel movies. Like I will not ever get into Marvel movies.
So you just hate franchises, is what you're saying.
Well, I mean, it's like I don't even really want to like take the like anti-capitalistic thing of like, oh, they're just trying to make money, because an argument to that is like, yeah, they're all trying to make money, but it's like that is part of it, but it's like it just gets to a point where like it just becomes redundant, and it's like this is very similar. Same James Bond. I mean, it's like very similar to all the last 10 they made. There's nothing you can do to like trick me. Yeah, so I mean, okay, so overall I would say, to finish that that line, I would say that, okay, so I'm more into music than movies, and I've had some music guests on recently, and I've just been like, I'm just not into new music. But since we're talking about movies, obviously I'll stick with that. Same thing with movies. Like, I just have not been that into like new movies, TV shows. There are some TV shows, more so TV shows than movies, that I'm into. I'm just kind of, and even like Martin Scorsese himself has said stuff about how like these Marvel movies are killing cinema. So first of all, do you agree with the fact that like movies are getting worse? It sounds like you may not, because you actually like a lot of these movies. And if so, if you do agree with that, do you kind of agree with Martin Scorsese in that like some of these franchises are just killing off, true like old cinema style movies?
So to answer your first question, I don't agree at all that movies are getting worse. I think that if you went back to go back to like, any random year, and even one of the best years of all time, look at 1999, and there's a podcast that I'm a really big fan of, podcasts like It's 1999, where they look at all of the movies that came out in 1999. Most of them are forgettable. Most of them are not good films. Most of them are just kind of like bad stuff, because in any given year can point to like all these things that you won't remember. But if you say to someone, oh, 1999, such a great movie year, and they could be like, yeah, The Matrix, Magnolia, Fight Club, like, or like all of these. I don't think Fight Club came out the year, but you get my point. Or
I was actually going to say Fight Club when you said 99, so okay. I think it did, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
Or yeah, I think it was 99, but I was in high school. but we could check it if you want. But
Yeah.
yeah.
But like the point is like if you can point to a given year and like okay all these good movies come out and that's because you're living in the moment and I think it's the same with music or anything else. You're living in the moment and you're just experiencing all this stuff where 10 years from now we're not going to remember the bad movies that came out in 2022. We're going to remember all the Everything Everywhere is, the Banshees of Nisharan's, all the really good stuff, the stuff that will stick with you. And I think that's with the Scorsese thing. I know that's kind of the thing that everybody loves to jump on, and I think that he is right to an extent, but I think he's also kind of out of touch because I think that we are now living in an age where film is more dominated by franchises rather than 15 years ago when, or even further ago than that, when films were dominated more by quote unquote singular auteurs, like directors who had visions. But that's not infallible either. It's not like saying, okay, well, let's just go give Martin Scorsese whatever budget he wants and he'll just shit gold or whatever. Which obviously he makes incredible films and he's my favorite director.
He will
Yeah.
shit gold.
But like just one person that ignores the fact that I think the auteur theory is just kind of bullshit because movies aren't made by one person. Martin Scorsese works with actors and writers who, by the way, writers, we could talk about that, how the whole writer strike is going on and how writers are one of the biggest, if not the biggest, creative influence in a movie, and they have never gotten respect. Not now in the franchise era, not when it was more director-driven era. Definitely not in when movies were really bad for me is the Hays Code days, which if people don't know, there was a time period of about 30-40 years when the movies had this code on them that you couldn't show like anything cool. Basically, it's like you can't have like the bad guys have to lose at the end. There can't be any references to like anyone of any like other sexualities than heterosexual. There can't be you can't have like people of color like doing certain things. It's just really whack and outdated, even by those standards at times. And it's just like it's really like just puritanical, and it kind of ruined movies for a very long time. And I think that when people are like, well, they don't make them like they used to, like some like for a while before the 70s, when you did kind of have that new wave of these Scorsese's and Spielbergs and all these guys coming in, their movies were pretty bad. So well, not all movies, but there was a lot of bad stuff because it was restricted by this self-imposed code. And eventually they were able to break through that. But there are still some people in the franchise system making great movies. I don't think just because a movie is in a franchise or just because a movie is a Marvel movie, it's bad. Like, people like James Gunn, and might not be the best example because the last Thor movie was not great, but Taika Waititi making Thor Ragnarok, or even people who are, work well within that system and are able to make really great films. Like people like Christopher McQuarrie working really well with Tom Cruise, making all these Top Gun movie or making Top Gun and all the Mission Impossibles. The Russo brothers, who were a really important creative voice in the MCU, and Kevin Feige. So you do still have these creative voices in film. It's just kind of different. And I think the thing that I am most lamenting, which we're losing, because like I said at the beginning, we still have a lot of these smaller budget indie films that people are still getting to make their visions, but the ones, and we're still getting the big blockbusters, but what really losing to a large extent is the mid-budget ones, which don't really have a place that makes sense in the modern film landscape. And that is something I lament.
Yeah, well, first of all, I don't really want to be. Maybe I am, but it's like I don't know how old are you?
I'm 33.
Okay, I don't really want to be like one of those like old guys who's like, oh, it was so much better in the 60s or the 50s or whatever. But I don't feel that way. Like I don't feel like the 70s were better. I don't even like old movies. I'm really pretty bad, dude. Like my ADHD is so bad that like older movies just bore the hell out of me, even newer movies as well. But like, obviously Gone with the Wind was even older than 60s, but like I can't stand those types of movies. I think that like Wizard of Oz is one movie that I respect just because it was so weird and different at the time. But so yeah, I don't really want to be one of those guys. However, I will, and that's the whole thing, is this could just be because to date myself, I literally was in high school when Fight Club came out. I don't think I even saw it in high school. What's funny is I remember like some people I knew in high school being like, "Oh, we're gonna go see a movie." Like I was like, "What movie?" They're like, "Fight Club." They were all stoked about it. I totally thought it was gonna be like a jock, like, you know, literal like fight movie. And it turned out it was much more than just like a fighting movie.
Right.
But yeah, I've not to go into that right now, but I've actually heard some negative responses from Fight Club. I've heard people say that it isn't as good as people say it is. I personally think it's great. I think everything David Fincher does is great, and I'm very bummed out that Mindhunter got canceled. Right? I mean,
yeah, like
but yeah. So sorry, I know I'm like going off.
No worries.
Yeah, I'm going off here. But to summarize it, I think the main difference between let's say like the 90s, which in my opinion could potentially be my favorite time. I mean, you got Jurassic Park, which is just absolutely amazing. I don't even like those types of movies, but Steven Spielberg just killed it with that one. We also forgot the Fablemans on the Oscar list, right?
Yeah, I think I must have left that one off. Yeah, Fableman's also got Best Picture nomination.
Yeah. No, I don't even know if we went over all of them, just a couple. But Jurassic Park, Fight Club, Pulp Fiction being quite possibly one of the best movies of all time. Shawshank Redemption. And I'm sorry, but I cannot put any of these movies even close to those movies. And this is probably true for the past 5 or 10 years. The last movie that I saw in the theater that was on those levels would probably be like No Country for Old Men, which is 2007, right? I mean, I'm sure there's more. Obviously, Christopher Nolan's amazing, but I didn't even finish Tenet, and I love Christopher Nolan, but it's like I just didn't get what was going on.
Tenet wasn't my favorite Nolan. I think you're like definitely like picking like, okay, like you're taking like the best movies of the 90s, and if you're comparing that all of the best movies of the 90s against just movies of like 1 year or like a couple of years, we're only a couple of years into this decade. So I think that's maybe not a fair comparison, because I think that there definitely have like, if you look at the 2010s, I think that the last decade that completed, I think there was a ton of like really amazing films that came out in that decade. 2019 in particular, I think was a very, very strong year for film. Off the top of my head, one movie that came out that year that I absolutely adore is Portrait of a Lady on Fire. So
I didn't see that one.
I mean, yeah, it's a foreign film. It's like a French film.
I've heard of it, but
I mean, there's like something like that. A couple of years before that was Arrival. It was like an incredible film. Blade Runner.
Arrival. Yeah. But I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, Arrival was good, but I wouldn't put it up there. But yeah, if you want to keep listing some other ones, but I wouldn't. Well, first of all, this is totally subjective, and it's totally has to do with like, like they say, like everything in art, and music, and movies or whatever is all subjective, and it's all like, based on like when you were in high school or whatever else, and like memories and all that. So, I mean, obviously, there's no way that I'm going to debate you and say that like you're wrong or anything. But it's like, obviously, if you think that Marvel or like the Avengers is the best movie ever, but nevertheless, it still is fun to debate about it. And I just wouldn't put Arrival. I wouldn't put any of those movies. I didn't see Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Who was in Portrait of a Lady on Fire?
It's nobody that you would know really from as an English speaking audience.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of the last movie in 10 years that I could say is as good as any of those 90s movies that I mentioned.
Yeah, because for me, like, there's definitely a ton that I like. Jurassic Park is probably my favorite movie of all time, but like there's movies from that decade. You bring up Nolan, like Inception. I think that's a masterpiece from that decade. I know not everyone loves it, but La La Land is another one I think is phenomenal. So I think you can pick any era and even the eras that I don't like, when like the Hays Code was going on or something, and you can find excellent films from them, and you can plant your flagpoles in anything. And a lot of it too, I think, is just about like seeing things, like Jurassic Park is, obviously more people have seen Jurassic Park than Portrait of a Lady on Fire. And those are hard movies to compare because they're completely different in every way, but one is clearly more accessible than the other too.
Yeah. And I kind of just thought of some that are just as good, which would be, so I mean, I can't totally say what I'm saying, because there was Ex Machina, there was 1917 was absolutely amazing, maybe one of my favorite war movies, the Revenant. So it's like, overall, you probably are right, and I'm probably just more nostalgic for those older movies. I still don't want to say that you're right. I still think that those older movies, in my opinion, are better. Now, one other thing that I'll say that I think kind of like makes my point better is that TV, in my opinion, is way better than it was in the 90s. Obviously, in the 90s, you only had so much to compare it to.
I would
There wasn't
agree.
nearly as much.
We
But
are living in an era of prestige TV for sure.
Yeah, but with that being said, with so many different streaming channels who just have a shit ton of money, I would say most of them are still bad. Like most, I would probably say maybe 90 to 99% that I see on TV are bad. I don't want to watch. And with this being said, I literally don't want to watch them. So I've given some a chance, but like Euphoria is amazing. I'm assuming you like Euphoria, right?
I haven't seen. I know about it, but I haven't seen Euphoria. But
Yeah.
what I would say is that, and it's a point that I can't remember. I think it was like maybe an executive from FX, but one of the I think it was, I can't remember his name, but the executive from FX a couple of years back, and it was when the Emmys were rolling around, and it had to kind of to do with the fact that The Americans, which is one of the greatest shows ever made, was never got really any
I haven't
Emmy
seen
love.
that.
Oh, that's a great show, but like his point was that there's too much good TV. There's so much good TV that people are missing the truly great TV because people are busy watching things that are pretty good, stuff like, I don't know, like just throwing something out here, like a Modern Family or something. So they're missing The Americans, or they're missing a show that I really love right now, which is Poker Face, which is, and that has to do with the fact that, like you said, there are so many streaming services. Probably a lot of people don't have Peacock, but if you do, go watch Poker Face. It's amazing. But yeah, there is just so much stuff to watch, and there's a lot of it that's not great. I would say 90% maybe seems pretty high to me, but I think that there's a lot of just really good, really watchable TV stuff that you can just put on, and because of that, there's no time to watch something like even like a Better Call Saul. Like that is never gonna like get the numbers that Breaking Bad did, because those are both shows that obviously are, one's a spin-off of the other one, but Better Call Saul never did as well as Breaking Bad because I think partially it's just in this landscape where there's so much good stuff to watch.
It's also it's not as good for what I agree with you what you said, but it's not as good. It's more boring. I watched all of it because Breaking Bad is my favorite show of all time. Best. I've actually said when it
I actually like Saul better. I love Breaking Bad, but I love Saul, and it is slow.
Such a hot take,
but I love it. I love I love both of them, but Better Call Saul is absolutely, it's such an incredible character study.
Such like a, I mean, the problem that I had with it is they drew it out so long, and it just was not exciting. For like the first 3 seasons were like, man, and it's like, honestly, I don't even think the character development was really there, and it was there, but it wasn't there in terms of how long they drew it out for. Was it 5 seasons or 6?
It lasted 6 seasons. I don't know. I really appreciate. I thought it was a very slow descent, and every season there's something else, like what happened with Chuck. It worked. It really worked for me. I'll say without rambling too much more.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to go into each and every one of these movies or TV shows, and as a opposed to that, like kind of like go over them all as a whole. It's hard because we only have so much time, but yeah,
and like you said, it's subjective. Like film and TV are subjective. So
yeah, it's just whatever you're into. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I can make a case against like Marvel and stuff like that, but um yeah, I don't know. I don't yeah.
And not every
But
Marvel movie is amazing. There's plenty of things that Marvel has done wrong, but there's also, particularly the last couple of years, but there's also been some really great stuff the past couple of years, and like throughout it. And it's all subjective. No, we're never going to be able to convince someone that doesn't like a film to like a film. But I think that lumping everything all in together, being like, I don't like this, or like I don't want to watch this, is maybe a little too reductive, because while there is a certain style and tone to a lot of the Marvel movies, they're very different. And I could say the same thing about just like foreign films, or about action films, or A24 films. Like, there are certain similarities, but they are all very different. And I might like one A24 movie and hate another one.
yeah. And it's honestly, even with A24, I haven't seen a recent A24 that I've been really into. I don't even know if I've seen one in a while. But I mean, one thing that I think that I for sure can say is that like Netflix has gone downhill in a bad way, and I don't know why. I mean, people have said stuff like, "Oh, there's so much competition out there with all the different streaming services now," but it's like, I mean, I only imagine they have just a ton of money, and are they really choosing to like not spend that money and choosing to like make these shitty documentaries? Like, I literally just saw like a documentary on Waco, a trailer for it for Netflix, and it's like, dude, like I think Hulu or some other company like made a TV show that was actually pretty good on Waco already. Like,
I thought that was
we
the
don't need to see
follow-up
this
to the.
again.
I thought that was like a season, like somewhat of a season 2 of the original Waco series. I might be
Well, the
wrong.
original Waco series, if we're talking about the same thing, the original Waco series was an actual TV show. The thing that I just saw, the Netflix thing, is a documentary.
Okay. I
And
didn't know,
I don't
because
know
I
if
know
you,
that they're making like another thing that's like after Waco. I didn't know that was the documentary, or I might be talking about something else.
well, that's a whole other thing too, is the fact that they're making so much stuff. They're kind of like getting into a situation where they're like, oh, let's just do another one, which I actually wouldn't mind another Waco. I think that the idea of doing like a Waco, which they covered pretty much fully,
Mhm.
but then the idea of doing another Waco where like what happens after, which I think a lot of the characters died, so I don't even know what they would do.
Mhm.
But like I that's the whole thing, is I'm not gonna like hate on all sequels, or what would you call it if it's after a sequel, like a series, I guess?
I guess, yeah, I would call that a franchise.
A franchise. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to hate on all of them. It's obviously I like Better Call Saul. I thought there was a place for that. The thing is with the Marvel movie. Okay, so for one, I don't really want to like offend you or anyone else. I don't think that I will offend you because
I don't make the Marvel movies. You could say whatever.
no, yeah, and not only that, but you're a film critic, so you obviously know more than me, and also don't give a shit. Like, you probably rag on movies too, but like with the Marvel movies, it just comes across like it's kind of like for kids for one, and then these actors that they get and they pay them so much money to be in these movies. I just kind of wonder, like, is their heart really in these? Like Robert Downey Jr., does he really want to do this, or is he just doing it for the money? And as soon as you like throw money into it and make it all about money, in my opinion, it's just I don't know, it just ruins it. And it's like, is Robert Downey Jr., do you think he's really into these roles? I mean, like a 50-year-old, 60-year-old man or whatever.
Well, I think, like, yeah, I think that's why a lot of Marvel actors, they do stop after a certain point. They tell the story, and that's what I love about Robert Downey Jr.'s, in particular, his arc in the Marvel movies, is you see him. And I do think that it, honestly, I'm not a fan of Iron Man 2, or even maybe not even 3 that much. But I do like the way his character went. I think that they gave him a good send off in Endgame. I would say the same thing about Chris Evans. Is like, I feel like, yeah, some of these actors, they do like playing these roles, but they do want to, after a certain period of time, branch off and do something different. And then that's why you get some new blood. Like, we haven't had Robert Downey Jr. is retired from the MCU, which is, I think, a good thing for both him as an actor and those movies, because you can't just keep telling, like you were saying, the same story over and over again. You have to kind of do something interesting and new. And I think that by having these characters, the original Avengers, their stories have now basically all come to a close. We're now in this doing this new thing with the Marvel movies. That's something I appreciate.
Yeah, yeah. So in terms of the well, yeah. First of all, I mentioned Robert Downey Jr. and whoever else is in Mark Ruffalo and the guy from No Country for Old Men. Well, for one, what's his name? The guy from No Country for Old Men.
It's not Javier Bardem. It's why am I spacing?
It's fine. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
If you're able to look it up, or I can, but it's actually like bothering me too, and I'm just completely blinking. And once I blink on a podcast, I can't think of it. But so that guy, whoever else is in Jeremy, I would say Jeremy Renner, but I don't know. But like, so those actors, it's like what bums me out about the Marvel movies, and this is all like, once again, this is all my opinion, whatever. But is I feel like they're not doing. Like Robert Downey Jr. hasn't done, in my opinion, a good movie, a serious. I guess I'll just say a drama. He hasn't done like a serious drama in a while where he can really show off his acting chops. But then you got that's the whole thing. Like then you got Leonardo DiCaprio, who almost every role he picks is, in my opinion, I'll just state that every time. In my opinion, a very good movie, and it seems like he's like really done his due diligence and like picking the movie. He's not just selling out, and he's one of the only actors. And it's hard to even say those guys are selling out because once again, maybe they're into the roles, but I don't know. That's just my opinion. It's like I really respect actors who like go after roles that they can like really sink their teeth into, and I don't really know if those actors are doing it for comic book movies. But then again, like that's the thing is I won't even say all comic book movies, but I actually thought I didn't love, but I liked the Batman with Robert Pattinson. And I feel like Robert Pattinson's another guy who I think he's doing what he wants to do. I think he's choosing movies that he wants to do. And it's like, I respect people for doing that. I don't respect somebody who does a movie for the salary or whatever,
Yeah, I mean, it's always, there's always like a calculus with actors where, you mentioned like Leo and stuff like that, and they are making these movies that I think on one level they are trying to like balance the art and the money, because all the actors do make movies for money, and it's hard to say how much of this is them wanting to do this as a passion project and how much of it is them just doing it as a way to get money. And sometimes it's a one for them, one for me kind of thing. But I don't think that being in these movies, like I think that Robert Downey Jr. has not really flexed his muscles in anything else other than Marvel movies for a while. But you get other people like look at Chadwick Boseman. I think that he's someone who always picked projects that were very meaningful or interesting to him, and I think that I would definitely include Black Panther in that. I think that he played all of these characters that were like you can point to all of these hugely important characters. Like he plays, for example, Jackie Robinson in a film, but I think that playing like one of the most prominent, important Black superheroes and being like that a character on the screen, that meant something to him too. So I don't think it's either, we're just doing this for the money or we're just doing this for the love of the craft. There's always going to be both.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And you're right. I can't say if they're doing it for one, who knows why they're doing it. I mean, I can't really say why they're doing what they're doing. I totally agree with that. And Chadwick Boseman, he was the guy who like died. He was the main guy in Black Panther, right? Yeah. I didn't see Black Panther. But like I said, there are, and that's the whole thing, is there are some, like I like Joker. I was gonna say if you consider that comic book, but it is considered a comic book, right? I mean, obviously I like Heath Ledger as Joker in all of those Batmans. I thought one problem that I had with those Batman, the Batman trilogy, Christopher Nolan, was the fact that I don't know. I just feel like they were all like drawn on. Like, even this Batman was like just drawn on too long. It was like after like I don't know, a certain amount of time, I was like, when's this going to end? It just went on too long, in my opinion. But I don't know. No, I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, you probably are right. Because like more movies are kind of like popping into my head. There are still a good amount of good movies. What I think that I could say though is the amount that are bad compared to good. That's the big thing. I think there's way more movies being made, and most of them are bad. And like you said before, it's hard to sift through the shit. It's like, I mean, I don't remember the last time I looked at the theater. the movie listings for the theater to go see a movie where I was like, oh, I actually really want to go see that. I mean, it's been a while, and I want to say the last, I don't even know. I was going to say like the Fablemans. I would see Everything Everywhere All at Once because it got so much praise, and it's A24, and I didn't see that. Banshees of Inisherin, I didn't really, once again, I didn't see any of these movies. I can't say. I only saw the trailer, but I wasn't into that first one they made. I didn't even see that one, but I'm literally going off of trailers here. But what was the first one that Colin Farrell and the other guy made?
In Bruges.
In Bruges, yeah. But you also mentioned Robert Pattinson, and it's like he hasn't flexed his muscle. In my opinion, everything he's done, but it's like there's been most of what he's done.
I don't think I said Robert Pattinson. He is great. Who
did you say? You said someone.
I think Robert Downey Jr.
Oh no, he just hasn't in a while. He just has not. And it's like that's the whole thing, is you can say like, oh, he really is into the Iron Man thing, and maybe he is, maybe he isn't, who knows. But in my opinion, I don't really think he flexed his muscle. I don't think he deserves any awards for it. Yeah. I agree, and that's the whole thing why I like the Oscars, is because it's like, I don't know, like these people are getting paid a lot of fucking money. And same thing with music. These people are getting paid a lot of money, and it seems like in music, the more money they're getting, the shittier they get. Like Weezer used to be really fucking good, and they suck now. Fall Out Boy sucks now. Like RHCP always has sucked. And all these bands that you hear on the radio, they keep getting more praise, but they're like not getting any better. And it's like, I feel like someone has to hold them like accountable. It's like, but since we're talking about movies, it's like, I don't like praising stuff just because it has a huge budget and it did really well in the box office. And that's where I think the Oscars comes in, is because it's like they actually, try to award stuff that has some depth to it. You know what I mean? It's like, and Everything Everywhere All at Once, even though it might not be my type of movie, I'm assuming it has some fucking depth to it. You know what I mean? I'm assuming there's some thought that has gone.
Yeah, and that's why I think that the Oscars need to actually expand their horizons and look at movies that have depth to them, that are big blockbusters, and might not be these ones that they conventionally nominate and stuff. So that's why I'm glad, things like, even though it wasn't my favorite movie of the year or anything, stuff like Top Gun and Avatar and even Elvis, which are these bigger budget movies, are getting play from the Academy. And like the Academy, there's a lot of like stuff like politics where it's like, making sure you've greased the right palms and you're throwing parties, and it's all about, and that even the Oscars is all about like, oh, getting that Oscar bump. And if we are an indie movie and we get nominated for an Oscar, then that movie's gonna get so much more money, because all the the people like me will go out and see a movie that we would not have seen. But I would not have seen Triangle of Sadness if it didn't get nominated for Best Picture, but I went out and saw it, And the Oscars know that, and the people making these movies and spending millions of dollars on these Oscar campaigns are doing that too. So it's not like the Oscars are part of it too. It's not like they are exempt from this kind of money-making machine that exists in Hollywood.
Yeah, well, don't get me wrong, dude. Like I think the Oscars have their issues. I think my point with it was more, and I also agree with you. I don't think that they should only go for indie movies, even though I tend to like, I think that's a problem that I have, is I tend to like these certain types of indie auteur, like David Fincher, Quentin Tarantino, and it's kind of like an elitist attitude, which I should not have. But with that being said, and I think the Oscars, you're right, they have, they pick and choose what they like, and it's a certain thing. But there's something that you could at least there's something that you could at least go to and say, okay, this really is a good movie. Like, and you might not even agree with it, and I don't even necessarily agree with it this year, mainly because there weren't many movies last year, and a lot of this too could be because of COVID. Like, a lot of this could be because of, and I know it shouldn't still be a COVID issue, but I know for 2020, 2021, it was just dead, and maybe there's some sort of lag. So that could be filtering into these last 3 years. But I do think that they are kind of like, I guess they're like a gatekeeper kind of for saying, okay, Yeah, The Rock made like what, like Jungle Cruise or Jumanji or whatever the fuck. But it's like it's not gonna fucking win an Oscar, and nor it should not.
Mhm.
None of those movies should. And I don't really know why I'm getting so passionate about this, because I shouldn't care that much. I'm not a film critic or anything, but it's like they shouldn't, and they're a gatekeeper. The problem that I have with music, with the Grammys, is that the Grammys are just completely full of shit. Like, it's like they give Justin Bieber an award, they give whoever, like these shitty pop singers who like probably don't write their own songs, blah blah blah. They don't, so they're not like a good example. But at least the Oscars, I feel like, is pretty hard on the movies that they do choose. They're not just like giving away Oscars like they are like candy or something. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some. I would say so. I think that what you were saying earlier about, just to backtrack a little about the COVID stuff, and I think that really affected the last 2 years, especially the Oscars. I think Coda was a pretty weak Oscar winner. I didn't even see Nomadland, and I see a lot of stuff, and that's the first Best Picture win I haven't seen in a minute, and I still just haven't gone around to it. But I
that
think
was
this
like
is
one of the ones that I
yeah,
saw that year.
or
Yeah.
like go back a couple of years before that, even in Green Book, I think is a pretty weak Oscar movie. And then you do have good ones like Parasite, Moonlight, from the past few years, but I think that the Oscars get it wrong almost as much as they get it right, and they pick things that don't have huge cultural staying power. And I think that I think that they have been making steps to go in the right direction, bringing in other people other than just like old white dudes. I still think, unfortunately, it's still too much of that. That's why a movie like Nope got 0 nominations. It was a huge, big budget Oscar movie, and it's something that was kind of in the middle, where it seemed like it was a movie from like a kind of auteur-ish director, a guy with a vision, Jordan Peele, that was saying some really important things. But it was still a movie that was a big summer release at the same time, so it kind of people didn't know how to treat it. And it got no nominations, unfortunately, despite it being one of the best movies of the year.
That seems stupid to me.
Yeah.
The time frame of
Mhm.
when a movie comes out, it's like that should have absolutely nothing to do.
Which is part of the reason why it's so incredible that Everything Everywhere is doing so well, because it came out in March. It came out 2 days before the last Oscar ceremony. So that's the fact that it's had that much staying power is a major credit to it. But I think that this is the year, and I think it's why it's been such a good year for movies, that we have come out of that kind of COVID slump, and all the movies that were being held back, stuff like Avatar and Top Gun, that were originally going to come out much sooner, are finally, these big crowd pleasing movies are finally coming out, as well as a lot of really good stuff for streaming. Like Coda was the first movie to be a streaming service movie that, despite what I think about it, that won Best Picture. And movies like that are finally starting to get a little bit more respected and renowned. Netflix has been trying to do that for years. They, as always, have a Best Picture nominee. But this year, it's All Quiet on the Western Front. I think they were going to try to push for Blonde before everyone realized that's like the worst movie ever made. But yeah, it's. I think that the combination of like, we're right at probably the streaming bubble is going to burst, and all these COVID movies have been held back, is what made it such a good year for movies.
Yeah. And yeah, speaking of Blonde, I don't know, did you watch Blonde?
Unfortunately,
And it was that bad? Because I was kind of looking forward to it, because I don't even know if you know this, but like the director of it directed some of Mindhunter. And so I was kind of,
I've seen his
like,
other movies, but I haven't seen Mindhunter.
what other movies did he do?
He did the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, which I really like, and he also did Killing Him Softly, which I really dislike.
Yeah, like I remember Assassination of James Ford was like really liked, and I remember not liking it as much as I thought I would have. And then same thing with Killing Him Softly, wasn't as good as I thought. But yeah, that director, I mean, anybody who does Mindhunter or is even on the staff of like David Fincher, but I mean, I know that's the big thing, is I know David Fincher. So you didn't see Mindhunter then?
I haven't. No, it's that's the thing. There's too much good TV that I'm missing the great TV.
You really have to watch that, especially if you're into David Fincher type stuff. I mean, it's just amazing. The thing that sucks about it though is it ended literally.
Yeah, I know, it just got canceled
at season 2. Do you have any idea it actually got canceled a while ago, but it's been like it's still kind of like, you know, out there that it's that it got canceled. And it's like, do you have any idea if it'll ever come back? Like,
It doesn't look like it, as far as I can tell. I mean, you never know. Like stuff comes back, like Arrested Development and stuff, and sometimes or like even Twin Peaks came back after what, like 25 years or something insane like that. So, but it doesn't look like anytime soon it's coming back.
yeah. So before I forget to ask you, I really want to know what you think of, like, speaking of Twin Peaks, I want to know what you think about David Lynch, because I know that he's like a well-respected director, but everything I've seen from him has either been like, not everything, because I like Mulholland Drive, I guess, but it's like most of what I've seen from him has been like just bad, in my opinion, like really just bad. But then I'm almost like, is this like intentionally kind of like almost like awkwardly like funny bad? And like, or like, do you like David Lynch? Or
So Lynch is interesting. I think Lynch is, and I would probably put like somebody like Terrence Malick in the same category, where they're really interesting, good creative guys, but when they just have unlimited leash, sometimes, and that's why I think like like the people like crying against like, oh, you can't let filmmakers can't just do it. Sometimes them and their unfiltered vision is not the best. Sometimes listening to other collaborators or even other studio executives is a good thing. And Lynch is good to a degree, but when he just does his full on just like David Lynch weirdness, it can be a little much even for me.
yeah. And I'm saying this, but I'm somebody who like wants to say I like David Lynch. Like I said, I like Mulholland Drive, and I haven't seen much of his other stuff, but like I want to like him. But like the Twin Peaks, I couldn't get through the first 2 seasons, and then the third one that came out, like you said, 25 years later, just seemed to like not. I didn't know what was going on like at all, and like I said, I didn't even finish the first two, but it was like almost like it wasn't even. It almost seemed like it wasn't even like tied into the first two, right? Like the opening shot was like some guy like filming like. I don't know if you remember the opening shot of the third season, but it was like really bizarre.
Yeah, the season 3 was just, it was a little much for me. It was a little just full David Lynch, just like, you want me to answer these questions? Well, I'm not going to. Like, it's like he was very much, they're subverting expectations, and doing it interestingly and cleverly, and then there's just subverting expectations just to say you subverted expectations. And I really like the first thing when you do it in a clever way that actually there's a reason for it and there's a commentary on it, and then there's subverting expectations just to be weird and subvert expectations. And maybe I'm wrong about season 3, but that's what it felt like to me, was David Lynch was just being like, you guys expect me to do this prestige return TV thing where it's a return to a show that everyone loved, and I'm just going to take those expectations and intentionally mess with you. And some people really liked that, but personally, I found it really difficult. Except for there was still some good stuff in it, particularly the 8th episode, the nuke episode, where they go back to the 50s and it's black and white. But some of that was really hard to get through.
Yeah, I agree. Like I just couldn't even get through it, and that's part of my problem. Is I feel like, you know, I have to probably really honestly, if I'm going to even talk about this stuff, like at least sit through it. But it's like I have a hard time sitting through it. That's kind of like an interesting take, though, the whole subverting expectations thing. Like, and I normally am into that kind of thing for the most part. Like, especially with music. Like I'm like, if I see a live band and like they just go nuts, or like I don't even know, like even if they're like drunk. Like I don't know how into music you are, but like have you heard like Bright Eyes or bands like that?
Yeah.
You know Bright Eyes. So
Mhm.
I saw him like a while ago, and he like just showed up drunk, and like in between songs he was like waiting, like it was just like a pause of like 2 minutes of just silence, and it was like awkward, and he only played like 2 songs that I knew from any of his albums, but it was like amazing. And like same thing with like Blink-182 back in the day. It was like they would just go out there and they would talk half the show and they would make jokes, and it's like people would be like, well, I just want to hear the music. But it's like, no, I kind of like this because it's like completely different than what I'm expecting to see. I don't really want to pay to go just listen to their album. So anyways, getting back to the movie aspect of that, how often do you think that so you really do think David Lynch is doing that intentionally to kind of like fuck with the audience? And how often do you think that kind of thing is going on? Like, do you think do you think people like David Fincher or Quentin Tarantino, those types of guys are doing that at all? Like intentionally fucking with their audience? Or like,
So okay, it's because you bring up Tarantino, and I think I'll give you a good example of a Tarantino example of him subverting expectations in a good way, in the first way, which was, and spoilers for anyone for Inglourious Bastards who hasn't seen it, why haven't you yet? But the way, because we've all seen World War II movies, we know actual history, we know what is going to happen at the end of this movie. We think we know that, okay, the bastards are going to fail. They're not going to be able to kill Hitler, whatever. But then the movie ends with them shooting Hitler a million times in the face and the building burning down. That is such a brilliant subversion of expectations. We all went in thinking we knew what was going to happen. We all were like, oh my. And then when he pulled the rug out from under us, it was so effective. He had a reason for doing that. He had a reason for just like, because it made the story more interesting. It wasn't just to fuck with people. It wasn't just to be like, look at how weird and I can just do whatever I want. And I don't think necessarily that happens a lot, but I think sometimes, not the great filmmakers, and I'm not saying David Lynch isn't great, but like there can be a tendency to be like, oh, I'm just going to do something unexpected just to do it without it servicing the story in a meaningful way. And it can be hard to say the reasoning behind a subversion. But for me, like Blonde is the other example. Blonde is a movie where it's just all about subverting expectations, and it's not really saying anything about anything. It's just they're switching aspect ratios and between black and white and color, and they're just
intentionally or like,
yeah, it just keeps, and like I was like, what does this mean? Like when they're in this aspect ratio, what does that mean? When they're in this other, and somebody asked the director, and he was just like, I just kept doing that to change it, to keep people on their toes, because I wanted that to be Marilyn Monroe's mindset was breaking, so I wanted to just make it weird and random. And that's so annoying to me. That is really bad filmmaking. And just using Marilyn Monroe as just kind of this weird prop to like tell the story about abuse, and just making all about all these subversions that really have nothing to do with anything other than you just think it's interesting to do it that way. It rings as hollow as compared to, like I said, the Tarantino version that he did with Inglourious Bastards, which really worked for me. And your opinions will obviously vary. I won't say what I think of it necessarily, but some people, for example, The Last Jedi, think that movie was brilliant in the way it subverted what we knew about Star Wars, and some people absolutely hate that and will send Rian Johnson death threats. Where you land on that spectrum, it is once again subjective. So I think, for me though, it's not something that happens a lot, but you do see it.
Yeah, well, as far as Inglourious Bastards go, what's funny is that I'm not gonna say that like I didn't like it, but I to me it kind of came off as a little. I know like it was totally intentionally goofy, but it kind of came off as like a little too goofy, and I don't know if I liked it. And to be honest with you, with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I don't really know if I liked that one either. Like, I don't know. There's just something that like rubbed me kind of like the wrong. But obviously, you don't really want to necessarily see it. I think you don't necessarily want to see it play out the way it actually does because you already know. But at the same time, I don't really necessarily know if I don't know. Like even with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. With that being said, like so, I also when I was thinking of movies that I liked, that was another one. Obviously, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, even though that was 2019, I think, right? Or yeah, that one was great. But there's something about the new Tarantino movies that, for one, they're just not as good as the old ones, in my opinion. And with that being said, they are still really good.
Yeah. And I would say it's like part of the reason is probably because his longtime editor did die. I think Django, or not Django, the Inglourious Bastards was the last movie she edited for him. And I think that the tone, or not the tone, the pacing has been a little bit not quite as whip smart and quick as it was in the early ones. And that goes back to what I was saying before. Films are collaborations. Everyone views Tarantino as the sole author of these movies, but there's a very important factor of those movies that was removed, and now the new ones are just missing a little bit something else.
Yeah, and you're kind of right. It's almost like the best way to say it is just kind of like the beat of the movie, which is like probably such like a hard thing. I would imagine the beat of the movie is like one of the hardest things to probably get, right? But it's like when you're making the movie, it's probably so difficult to kind of like know how the beat's going to be until you see it. And then, like you said, I think the editor probably messes around with that. But yeah, there's something about the beat of the movie, but there's also something about like, I don't know, like Inglourious Bastards, Django Unchained, and this one just came off like a little too goof. I can't even think of a better word to say than like goofy or cheesy, maybe. I don't even really want to say cheesy.
Yeah. And
but like,
just real fast, I want to say Sally Menke was her name. I just looked it up. Sally Menke is the name of the editor who passed away.
I remember when that happened. Did we figure out the name?
Oh, Josh Brolin. We forgot to say Josh Brolin. Yeah.
Did you just remember? Or did you
I did. I remembered it earlier, but you were saying something, so I was like, I'll say it when I start talking. I just completely forgot.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's the editor with Quentin Tarantino, but there's just something a little off, and I can't really put my finger on it. But with that being said, he's still one of my favorite directors. And then there's David Fincher, who, what I was kind of thinking about him earlier, he does seem kind of like somebody who, for one, I don't know if he necessarily does it in his movies, subverts expectations, but I know that he tends to do it like in real life. Like he did, like, I don't know if you know, but like he did like an interview with like Mark Maron. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the interview, he told Mark Maron, like, he's like, oh, like, let's not release that. Like, I don't like the way it went. And I was like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Like, just release it. And even standing with Mindhunter, like, it's just such a mind fuck that you wouldn't finish it. At least do 3 and like cap it or something. You know what I mean?
Well, I think
like, he literally
Fincher's a perfectionist. Like, if you listen to anybody who's worked with him, they're like, there's this. I always think of Mahershala Ali when talked about him working with him on Benjamin Button. He's like, yeah, David will get like 100 shots of you, like your feet walking down the stairs. Like he's like, he's so meticulous, more than probably anyone else in Hollywood. And that's why he was one of the original adopters of digital filmmaking when film switched from being shot on film to being shot on digital. And there's stories of like him doing Zodiac, which was one of the first big movies to really be shot on digital. And to bring up Robert Downey Jr., like they would just shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot. And Downey Jr. was so mad that they weren't like normally you'd have to break every 17 minutes or whatever to load it in a new reel. But since they weren't doing that, Downey Jr. was so mad that he would just like go and pee in bottles and leave them around the set, just as a form of protest.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of I've only heard about this, but it kind of reminds me of like Jared Leto, but in a different way. I don't know if you heard about Jared Leto as Joker. He was like, I think I heard something like he put like cum in a condom or something, and like
he nailed it. Yeah, like Jared Leto. That's another one of the things. It's just like he's just doing this to like try and be like edgy. Like he's one of my least favorite people. Like I can't stand Jared Leto. Like he's just like, oh, look at me, I'm a method actor. It's like, okay, man. Like, stop.
I don't know. I don't even know how like someone like him would be like taken seriously in Hollywood, And it's like a lot of these guys like have come out like kind of like against method acting, like the guy from Succession, Brian Cox. Because what's funny about method acting is that like did you hear about that? Like where the one actor Jeremy
that
Strong was method acting. I actually kind of like somewhat like respect that, because it's like obviously I don't really expect it with somebody like Jared Leto, but it's like at least like you're like really trying to take the role as seriously as you can. And it's, I mean, there's something almost kind of like funny about it, but like also kind of like endearing that you're like, this guy's like really putting like his whole into this, like even if he's not the greatest actor.
Yeah, I think like as someone who like did study acting for a while, I think I do respect that, as long as it's your process, as long as it's just you and you're not like making other people's processes worse. Like I'll give an example of someone who I think is a great method actor.
Which it seems like there's really no, sorry to cut you off, but it seems like there's like really no reason to get anybody else involved. You should just keep it to yourself.
Just do your own thing. Exactly. Like if that's your process, that's fine, but don't impact other people. And like, Daniel Day-Lewis, one of the greatest actors of all time, people talk about how difficult he is to work with and how much, because he will not break character between scenes. People hate him. He made everyone on My Left Foot carry him around and stuff like that. And he was like, Liam Neeson talks about how much he freaking hates him because of the set. Like, he was just like kept calling him like Valen on the set of Gangs in New York and making death threats to him. He's like, dude, we're between takes. You can like drop it right now. So it's so there's always a line, you know.
Yeah. But and another thing too is like, I mean, imagine if every actor in the movie was doing that. It would be impossible if every actor was pretending like they're, you know, it sounds like there's almost like a sense of entitlement when they're doing it. It's like, I can do this, but nobody else can. But yeah, like, that's like another movie. My Left Foot is what you said, right? Yeah. Like, once again, I haven't seen the movie, but what I've seen clips of it. It kind of comes off like really like goofy, and like, I know he like got so much like credit for doing that one, but it kind of came off like almost like weird to me, like kind of like it was like kind of like over, like he was overacting or something. Like,
yeah, I never saw that one either, actually,
yeah,
to be honest. So I'm on the same page with you for My Left Foot. I just knew the story behind that one scene.
But I mean, just from clips, have you seen clips of it or anything? Like trailer?
Yeah.
Like, doesn't it look like he's almost kind of like overacting in it?
I always think of that Family Guy bit where Stewie does like the My Left Foot musical. Like that always sticks in my head.
I haven't seen it. That's like a pretty like deep cut for like Family Guy, isn't it?
Probably. It's one of the early episodes.
Yeah. But yeah, so getting like a little bit away from, well, I actually had one other director I wanted to ask you about was, and what do you think about like M. Night Shyamalan?
Okay. I think he is really, really fascinating. And I think that his career arc has been super interesting because obviously he starts off, he does his The Sixth Sense is not his first movie, but his first big movie. That is a real hit. He gets anointed literally as the next Spielberg. Like, they put that on magazines with his face next to it. And then he makes some hits, and he makes some really good movies, in my opinion. Unbreakable, Signs, and then we start to see the cracks, like The Village. And he's still getting millions, like this huge, because he's the guy, you know, he's the guy. And then he starts making some movies in the studio system for these, and they bomb after bomb after bomb. These movies are getting steadily worse to the point where you get to like The Happening and The Last Airbender, which are like, especially Last Airbender, pretty irredeemable. And then he kind of takes a step back and decides that he is going to start betting on himself. And instead of getting these huge studio blockbusters where he's getting hundreds of millions of dollars to make this, he starts self-financing his movies, and he starts making really interesting horror that is on a much smaller scale. And because it's on such a small scale, even though these movies are making much less at the box office than his bombs, quote unquote, they are making so much more compared to their budget back. So he is now succeeding when he's putting out movies like Old, or like just recently Knock at the Cabin, because he's just self-financed these for a couple $1 million, and he's working with these actors that he's built these really good relationships with, because they're made for such little money. Then like double or tripling their budget and being profitable is much, much easier. So I really like the transition that he's made to be this kind of independent, basically, filmmaker.
Do you think at this point he's like self-funding? Because he probably has so much money. Oh, he's completely just doing it on his own.
I don't know the extent of it, but I know that he does self-finance his films. So, and I think he's been doing that since, I don't know when he started, but probably around right after, I think After Earth was the last movie that he did for a studio. And since then he's basically been self-funding.
Yeah, he's another one of those guys who, like, I'm almost like, are these movies so bad intentionally, the ones you named? Like, I actually liked The Village. Mm-hmm. Overall, I mean, I actually thought it was really well done. When I rewatched, I didn't like it as much. I think the first time I maybe wasn't as into movies, or I don't know, but the twist totally got me. I thought it was a great twist. The acting was great. The film design, everything like that was great. But then once you get into the next couple, Lady in the Water, for instance, like I think that was like one of the only ones I saw out of all like the really bad ones, but
Mhm.
I was almost kind of like wondering, is this kind of like a David Lynch? I don't think what's funny is I don't think that he's on the level of David Lynch in terms of like, it's so weird. It's so weird for me to say, but like, I almost want to say like genius, but like, even though I don't love David Lynch's movies. So I was almost kind of wondering, like, is he almost doing this intentionally as like what you were saying, subverting expectations? I don't think he probably was,
I don't
right?
think so. I don't think so. I think he's more like, or especially with those big budget movies like The Happening and stuff, and Lady in the Water, which you bring up, like he's more just buying into his own because he's been since such a young age told that you are amazing, you're the greatest filmmaker to ever live, and he just bought into that hype and just thought he could do no wrong, and he started just being like, yeah, I'm gonna make this, and like I think there's a subplot in Lady in the Water where there's like a writer whose novel is so good it's going to save the world and he plays the writer. Like that's insane. That's the most like egotistical shit I've ever heard in my life. But since he's reeled it back and made some of these smaller, more kind of independent, more kind of like in one location or more tightly, just kind of like a more just a tighter story, and kind of reeled it back a lot and kind of become a lot more humble, I think has gotten a lot better. I mean, he's made some really amazing films. He's made some really bad films, and his new films are probably the more interesting. They might not be his best, and they're definitely not his worst, but they're very fascinating.
Yeah. Did you see Knock at the Cabin?
I did. I had mixed feelings about it. There's a lot of stuff that was good, and there's a lot of stuff I didn't love about it.
Yeah. It's always like, I mean, he definitely always has the type of thing where you're like, oh, this looks, he always has like that weird vibe. I don't know if it would be like Dread kind of or something, but like, which I love, but even in the, because I didn't see that one, but even I saw Old and it was okay. But like even in the, and then I watched the first two seasons of Servant, and
Mhm.
I think it was the first two, and I was like really into him. I was like totally for it, and then me and my girlfriend started watching the third season, and I just couldn't get into it. It was like, and I feel like that happens with a lot of his movies, where it's like he either like kind of like nails it, like the early ones, or he doesn't.
Yeah,
Um,
very hit or miss, I think.
yeah, but yeah, he definitely does a good job of like building that kind of like what's going on here type thing. And
Mhm.
I like for whatever reason, another movie that's coming to mind, another director who is probably considered the best, Stanley Kubrick, with like obviously The Shining, but then with I remember talking to a guy about his last movie, Eyes Wide Shut, and we were talking about it, and he's like, it just has such a good sense of like dread kind of, it's
Mhm.
like not a whole lot is happening through the movie, but like you always kind of feel this like dread, you know what I mean,
Yeah,
like
and,
this kind of
and
like,
Kubrick was a master of tone, like especially like you brought up The Shining. That's a movie that just like like I think that's another one where like not a lot happens, but you're just kind of feeling very uneasy. Or 2001, that movie is so slow and it's so just like, but the vibes of it are just like just unease throughout the entire movie, and there's something that's just not quite right, but there's also something you're like that out there's something to be gained. There's some kind of knowledge just beyond, and if we could just grasp it, we might be able to achieve this higher understanding. So I think that he of like a lot of those old masters, he was really him and Hitchcock were really the masters of just setting a tone.
yeah. Would you say that he is the best, Stanley Kubrick? I mean, I think most people kind of say he is the best director.
I mean, it's hard to say. It's my personal favorite is Martin Scorsese, and particularly the Scorsese when Scorsese doesn't do gangster films. I like his because when he tries to do something like Silence or even Hugo, um, maybe Spielberg too. It's because Spielberg is just a master. Like Spielberg, he's done everything. In 1993, he did both Schindler's List and Jurassic Park. Like, how do you do that? Like, that's amazing
That's
to me.
nuts.
That's better than like most directors. 99% of directors don't have as good as a movie of either of those. And and he's done that multiple times. We've just made two classics in the same year. We had Minority Report and Catch Me If You Can the same year, and it's just all the first three Indiana Jones was just the list of things that he's made that are both just genre defining sci-fi or fantasy films, but on the other side, he makes intense, great dramas too. It's hard to choose for me, but if I had to choose one, probably Spielberg or Scorsese.
Yeah, and what's your? Well, yeah, Spielberg's another one that I wanted to go over because I don't know, he's like interesting guy, but it's like you don't really see much of him. Like he doesn't really do any interviews. Or it's like I never really see of him, and then he'll like come out with a movie like every year or whatever, and I don't even like really hear his name that often. I mean, he's
Really?
obviously yeah. I mean, it's like, obviously like everyone knows who Spielberg is,
Mhm.
but like I don't really see his face. I mean, does he do a lot of interviews? That he
I've
doesn't go on
definitely
like
seen a
Jimmy
lot of his
Kimmel and
stuff.
okay,
He
maybe
doesn't
I'm
do it
just
like late night stuff, but like I've definitely seen a lot of interviews and stuff like that. And like for example, I'll say that when I saw the Fablemans and that kind of iconic last scene happens, knew what the scene was going to be because I'd seen him give an interview where he describes this moment from his life, and I'm like, okay, here's that scene, you know. So I've seen a lot. Like he'll talk to like AFI and stuff like that, and I don't know.
yeah, I'm sure he does a lot more like actual like film interviews. I just haven't seen him in like I guess like the mainstream media, but
Yeah.
that goes for a lot of the directors, I guess. But what would you say your favorite Scorsese movie is? Would it be Silence or Hugo or
Those are in contention. Honestly, it might be like The Aviator's up there too. Um, Gangs in New York, I think, is very underrated. I think that is just this really like it does a lot of the stuff that The Departed does, but in my opinion, it does them a little bit better. Leo is obviously phenomenal in it. You've got Daniel Day-Lewis doing his method acting insanity that's so good in that movie. Um, it's really tough. I'm weird where I like, unlike a lot of people who like Scorsese, I like latter day Scorsese a lot more than the early days Scorsese. His DiCaprio era I like more than his De Niro era. Um, but yeah, honestly, yeah, it's probably either Silence or Gangs in New York.
yeah, Silence was an interesting one. It was like super long and it was good though for sure. And then what about? I'm just like going over names here, but I wanted to ask you about Ryan Johnson too, since you brought him up. Like, I was like, oh, I'm gonna like this guy.
Mhm.
Like ever since Brick, I think, because I and people told me about Brick. Oh yeah, then I also want to ask you about the Donnie Darko guy, but yeah. So I saw Brick. I wasn't into it, but then I saw like the sci. Well, I think he does sci-fi, but there was one sci-fi one he
Looper,
did, Looper, and I liked
yeah.
I liked Looper, even though it also wasn't what I expected. But then since then he did Star Wars, and then he
Mhm.
did his most recent ones, like the crime ones or whatever, like the
Yeah, the Knives Out, Glass, and yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And I just wasn't into the night. I watched the beginning. I didn't finish it, but it was like I just couldn't get into his style. It just kind of came off. I don't. Once again, I don't even know what the word is. But what do you think about him overall?
He's another guy who's really hit or miss for me. Interestingly enough, funny story. When he was, since you brought up Brick, he's actually from my hometown, San Clemente, and he was shooting.
I gotta say, I'm from that area.
Oh, nice, yeah. And
Yeah. Do you
he
still
was.
live in that area?
I don't.
Okay. Okay.
Sort of, but not really.
Okay.
But I was going to San Clemente High School while he
Wow.
was shooting scenes of Brick on the weekends at San Clemente. And I have friends who are extras in Brick because of that.
Oh
Um,
wow.
but interestingly, that's one of the few films of his I haven't seen. But yeah, he's really hit or miss for me. I like Looper a lot. I don't love Brothers Bloom, but I really like both Glass Onion and Knives Out a lot. And I think that's also why I like his show Poker Face. It's a lot of the same vibes. Um, Last Jedi, I always go back and forth on. I get caught between. I think I'm like, oh, I don't know if I love this, and then I hear like some people on the internet talk about it. I'm like, you guys are the worst. Maybe I actually do like this.
Yeah, yeah. For some reason, I thought when you said Last Jedi, for some reason, I thought that it was like one of the original three, but it's not. It's
Oh
like
yeah, no. It's the second one of the sequel. It's the one that J.J. Abrams didn't do.
okay. So do you feel like J.J. Abrams pretty much did a good job on those, and then Ryan Johnson didn't? Wait, so what number would it be?
He
Was it the
was
one?
eights. He
Okay,
did.
so they did okay. So they did 4, 5, and 6, and they did 1, 2, and 3, and then they did 7, 8, 9. Okay.
Yeah.
So do you feel like JJ? What do you? I was so many names. J.J. Abrams. Do you feel like he did a good job on overall, but on
I
those
think
two?
I think that they were trying to do fundamentally different things. And JJ was very much trying to return Star Wars to what it was before the prequels. And I do like The Force Awakens, the first one he did. I think it is a little bit just saccharine and trying to treat the way it treats the original trilogy, and it is a little bit too much of a rehashing of those first ones. I think then Johnson really wants to deconstruct all of that, and then that have JJ come back to it after that it's kind of, I think each of those movies works well on its own, but watching them as a trilogy or as a part of a greater series doesn't work at all because they're competing with each other and trying to make opposite points. So I don't know. Like I do like J.J. Abrams. Some of the time, a lot of the time, I love Mission Impossible 3. But yeah, it's weird because, like I said, if you judge them as a whole trilogy, it doesn't work. But if you just sit down and watch them, I think they could be actually kind of interesting.
Yeah. So do you think like J.J. Abrams was mad at Ryan Johnson for what he did, or
I don't think he was mad, but I think he was just like, he was a little bit because he did step away. He didn't want to do 2 and 3, and he kind of got brought back to Disney. Disney brought him back after Colin Trevorrow got fired, pretty much. And so I don't think he was mad because he was just telling a different story that JJ had no intention of trying to finish, and then JJ had to finish it, so he got kind of stuck in not a great situation, in my opinion.
Oh wait, so he ended up finishing the Ryan Johnson movie just because like the studio didn't like how Ryan Johnson did it or something?
No, so he was hired to do, JJ did the first one of the new trilogy, and then Ryan did the second one, and then there was somebody else who was going to do the third one, and that Colin Trevorrow, who got fired from doing the third one. So J.J. Abrams got hired to do the third one.
Why did he get fired? I don't even know that name, Colin Trevorrow.
He's the guy who did Jurassic World. There's not really an official reason been given, but a big part of it people think is, and this is a conspiracy. These are all kind of just theories, but he between those movies, Colin Trevorrow made this movie called Book of Henry that everyone hates. I haven't seen it, but like just across the board, critics, audiences, people just do not like that movie. And I think that Disney was like, ooh, I don't know if we want to go with this guy. I don't. And I think they also, after Disney kind of like was very notorious at the time of just kind of like firing Star Wars directors. The same thing happened with Solo. Allegedly, it might have also happened with Rogue One, but it was a little more amicable with that one. So Disney kind of probably knee-jerk reaction just got rid of somebody. And his script is out there for what his Star Wars movie would have been called, which is Duel of the Fates, his episode 9. And it's interesting. It's not perfect, but it's very interesting. It might have been better than what we got. I don't know. It's hard to say without actually seeing the movie.
Yeah, I was just gonna like shit on Disney, but I see that you're wearing a Disney.
Oh no, it's
shirt.
okay. It's okay. Yeah, go ahead. Like they're a big evil company. I get it.
Yeah, I mean it's just like
I just live close to Disneyland.
I feel like they're just ruining whatever they're touching, and they're making more money off of it. Good for them, whatever. But it's like they also like, I don't know. I just can't stand them. Like it's like they portray themselves as like some sort of like big like loving liberal company, but it's like, why the fuck do you charge so much to go to fucking Disneyland? It's like I don't feel like they do a whole lot at Disneyland to revamp it. Although I haven't been in a while, and I heard that they have some new rides. I don't know. It's just, whenever I go to Disneyland, I'm like not really happy with the experience. I'm like, why is this so much money? Like, fuck it.
Yeah.
But that's neither here nor there. But and it's like I'm sure a ton of people love what they're doing with Star Wars and whatever else. But so yeah, so I've just gone over so many names, and there's a little bit there's other stuff I want to get to, but like one last name I'll throw out there is like the Donnie Darko director. So do you think that I'm forgetting his name, but do you think that he is like a genius with Donnie Darko, or do you think it was just kind of like he just got lucky with that movie and just kind of like wasn't able to capture the success after?
I've actually never seen Donnie Darko. I know, okay, Richard Kelly. I know that I actually haven't seen any of his movies. I know that like Southland Tales was his follow-up, which I know people do not like. Like I know that movie has a well, I'd say mixed reputation. I think some people think it's kind of like a secret masterpiece or something. But yeah, I honestly haven't seen any of his stuff, so I wouldn't really be able to speak intelligently on him.
Yeah, so yeah, he did Donnie Darko. Obviously, it was like, I mean, I might say that it's like one of the best indie, like truly indie movies of like all
Mhm.
time, in the sense that like it was like truly low budget, and it was just so just well done and mind blowing. And then he goes on to do, I think, Southland Tales after that one,
Mhm.
which I didn't, once again, didn't watch the movie, but I heard it was just an absolute shit show, but almost in the sense of similar to other directors that we've mentioned, where I'm almost kind of like, like, was this like intentional? And then he did The Gift, which I watched, and it was just kind of like a shit show. And I'm just kind of like wondering with some of these guys where it's like, is he really a genius, or did he just get lucky with, the one and that's it? I'm assuming his career's over. I don't know. But so I'm also interested in like, I don't know how much you know about like the inside film industry, like kind of like talking about like it seems like a lot of the stuff in the film industry you would think would get out, like doesn't get out. And I know obviously a lot of stuff does get out, like in TMZ type stuff, but like, I don't know. I'm just like very interested in like the way things work. Like, do the actors get mad? Like if they're in a movie, like does Mark Wahlberg get mad at M. Night Shyamalan for the happening? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It seems like it's very hard to answer. I don't think anybody really knows what's going on behind the scenes, right? I mean, it's like, um, yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how to like phrase this as a question, but it's like I'm just like very interested too in like the hierarchy of like Hollywood,
Mhm.
like with um, but yeah, it's very hard for me to kind of like ask it as a question unless you're actually probably like literally in behind the
Yeah,
scenes. You know what I mean?
I mean there's always stuff that is like really kept under wraps. And then there's things that are also like open secrets that for a while I think people knew that Kevin Spacey was, for example, kind of a creep, and then the floodgates just opened. But so I think there's always stuff like that where, and I'm not saying all of it's like bad abusive stuff like that, but like there's always you know people always try to keep certain stories under wrap in Hollywood, but other people are always trying to bring those things to light. So it is kind of an ebb and flow type, pull and tug type thing.
Yeah, there's just something about Hollywood in particular. I think out of anything else that is just like really fascinating on like how it all works. Like I would just love to be like a fly,
Mhm.
on the windowsill or whatever, like just watching everything behind the scenes. Um, really, it's probably just like a normal day job, day to day.
Mhm.
But yeah. So as far as acting goes, like we've gone over like directors. I've always kind of like wondered too if like, do you feel like there's any kind of like, I feel like every actor out there is like, in my opinion, it's like when I watch, unless it's like obviously just really bad, they're all like okay or whatever. Like it's just like okay, whatever, like they're doing their job. But like, do you feel like there's any actors out there that like are like maybe like big names that like are just not good actors? Like they're just kind of like getting by on their looks, or and it's like and a better way to phrase the question would be like, really, what differentiates the best actors with the worst actor? It's very hard for me to like kind of tell as a non-actor, and same thing with directors. But um I don't know if you're able to like really answer
Yeah.
that.
I
But
mean, as assessing, I think you're right that assessing acting is something that is very hard, and I think that's why we were talking about the Oscars earlier. When you see a lot of these actors playing people in biopics, they tend to do really well at the Oscars because, it's like an analogy I heard once was that it's like art. It's like looking at a painting, and if you look at an abstract painting and it's something you've never seen before, someone might think it's good art and someone might think it's bad. And if someone's just doing a performance, then it's like that. But if you paint a picture of like a still life or an orange or something you can actually look at and be like, wow, this painting is exactly like this orange or this sunset or whatever, that we can physically look at it, compare it. You can look at Austin Butler and say he is doing a great Elvis impersonation. You can literally put them up side to side and be like, that's good acting because we can tell it's the same. But if something like one of my favorite actors, Colin Farrell, look like he's also nominated this year for Banshee of Inisherin, and it's like, well, how can you say like this is good acting or this is bad acting? It's very subjective, and it's not, you can't really easily point to something like that. And for me, he's really great. He was in 4 movies this year, and he was in vastly different roles in all of them. He was in Banshees as this kind of idiot, but very funny, but very likable. But he had a dark side to him. And then after Yang, he's this very quiet, contemplative guy. In the Batman, he's obviously this big, bombastic, just kind of criminal. Who's just like, what are you showing me? And then he was also in 13 Lives, really great all great performances. That to me is what makes a good actor, is someone who can elicit all of these different emotions in you, and someone who can, like, as much as I love an actor like George Clooney, I think George Clooney is a really good actor. He's pretty one note. What makes a great actor for me is someone who can do all kinds of different performances and really, like, if you see I guess the short answer is, if you see a performance that really moves you, that's good acting.
Yeah, and it is very rare that I see that. That's the thing. It's like I can't even think of the last movie that I saw where I was like, oh man, like that guy just. Yeah, I don't know. For me, I almost feel like it's more of a situation of like, do you just like this person in general? I guess, like, do they look good on screen? Like, but obviously, like, there's Daniel Day-Lewis, but I don't even really know if Daniel Day-Lewis himself has ever, like, or anybody for that matter, has really like brought any emotions out of me. You know what I mean? It's like movies have, the script has, but it's like I can't even think of the last actor that did. But in terms of what about, like, do you think there's any like bad actors out there that are just like kind of skating by? Like, I want to say someone like Seth Rogen, but I think he's actually like a pretty good actor. I mean, I like Seth Rogen, but like, can you think of any like actors that just don't do it for you? Like,
there's a few, like we touched on. Jared Leto, I think is just not a good actor, and it might be just because I think he's annoying. I try not to be too mean to actors, but I would say he's won
you
an
probably
Academy.
shouldn't be too nice. You know what I mean? They get so much praise probably in general, but
there's one actor who's won an Academy Award, and I'm sure he's a nice person, but I don't think Mark Rylance is a good actor at all. Like, I just cannot stand him in anything.
Have you seen the new show? Well, it's the second season of, I'm forgetting the name of it. It's like some like old like 1920s. He's like a lawyer.
Oh no, I haven't seen it.
You know what I'm talking about though, right? It's HBO.
No. Oh, well, no. I was thinking The Outfit, but no, that's a movie. No, I don't know.
Unless I'm not thinking of the right name. But what's the name of that? That's gonna bother me too. Are you able to look that up? Mark Rylance's TV show, HBO.
Yeah, let me just look up his like IMDb or whatever.
Thanks, man. I do it, but I know I don't have my computer open.
Let's see here.
It's just gonna bother me if I don't get that. But yeah, so, well, as far as he goes, I think he just
The Undeclared War.
No, I must be thinking of the wrong.
Okay. I don't know. Just Google search is not great, so I don't know.
I'm gonna have to try and find that now. Which guy is Mark Rylance? I should know his. I should know him.
He's like he's like a bald guy. He's like in his 50s, and he's always kind of talking like this. Yeah, sure, Mark Rylance. Did you see Bridge of Spies? Or he was also he's also at the end of Ready Player One.
Okay.
He's in like a lot of Spielberg shit, like a lot of recent Spielberg shit.
I mean, he's like, from what I know of him, he kind of just, he's definitely not like a main character guy. He's just kind of like a background guy.
Yeah, he just never does it for me, man. I can't with Mark Rylance. Sure, he's a nice guy, but man,
this is gonna bother me until I figure this out. Yeah. So what about Yeah, so Perry Mason is the guy. The show, Perry Mason.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
Yeah.
he was on that.
No,
Okay.
no, no. It's not him. It's the main actor of that show.
Oh,
I
that's
thought you were.
I actually that's Matthew Reese. I love Matthew Reese. Matthew Reese is
Okay, okay.
great. He's phenomenal.
Well, it's funny when you said Mark Rylance. I thought you were talking about Matthew Reese, and I was kind of thinking like, it's like I don't dislike him like as a, you know, as like a person, but I wouldn't. I don't know. I wouldn't. I don't know if I'd say like he doesn't grab my attention or anything. It's not like I'm like, oh, I really want to watch the show because he's in it, but he's not bad.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
I love The Americans, and like I thought he was so captivating on that show.
Yeah, I should probably check out that one. So is that pretty much those are the only two guys you can think of that are just aren't great actors?
I mean, I mean, honestly, those are the only guys I would really call out are Rylance and Leto. I can't think of anybody else off the top of my head that I really don't like.
Well, what do you think of like Seth Rogen? Because so the thing is, I like Seth Rogen, and I know he really is probably a good actor, but especially in his beginning days, it seemed like he was just kind of like he didn't like in Superbad or whatever. It just seemed like he like he's funny, but it didn't seem like he's a great actor, right?
I think he was good. He was like Clooney, where he was just like for a while at least. I think he was good, but just pretty one note. Like he's good at playing one specific part. That's probably a lot like what he liked in real life. But he's funny, he's captivating. I think he's interesting. But after seeing him in The Fabelmans, I think he shows a whole nother side to him that I really really enjoyed.
Yeah, I mean, he was also in Jobs. He did a good job. I don't know if you saw Jobs.
I haven't seen Jobs.
Not the one with Ashton Kutcher, but there was another one with
The
Michael Fassbender that was like really good. Yeah. So he's definitely Seth Rogen has definitely been in. He definitely has been in some big movies. So in terms of the actual film critique, like so when you go watch movies as a film critic, do you try and like kind of go in unbiased? Are you like, is that kind of like the goal? Like even if you think like, oh, I'm probably not gonna like this movie. Well, like first of all, do you watch most movies because you're a film critic?
I try to watch a lot of stuff. There's so much stuff that like, I'm gonna miss some. Like when the Oscars were coming out, I was like, okay, I got to make sure I see all the Best Picture things. I try to see all of the ones that are going to be big and culturally impactful, but can't miss it. Can't see everything, unfortunately, because it's not my full-time job. It's just a freelance thing. But and if I'm interested in something, I will make an effort to see it.
Yeah. So, but when you are going to see the movies, do you try and kind of go in like unbiased, like even if you're like, I don't think that I'm gonna like this movie, you still, I guess, I don't know, like you don't hold some movies above other ones or whatever. Like,
yeah, I try to go in as unbiased as I can. You're always going to bring your personal biases, and even just the experience of how you see a movie will vastly affect it. I think, like I got like seeing Dune, for example, on the big screen. I'm really glad I got to see. That was when the shutdown was happening. I went straight to HBO Max. I talked to another one of my friends who's like a really big film person, and they really did not have the same experience that I did. They watched it at home. They really didn't like it, but seeing it in the theater with the surround sound and everything was really great. So you try to go in as neutral as you can, but that's hard to do.
yeah, and like with the attention span thing that I was talking about, I feel like nowadays, like people with all the YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and everything, people's attention span has gone down. Do you feel like sometimes if it's like a 2-hour movie or longer and it's slow but it's good, do you feel sometimes like after 30 minutes to an hour, you're like, oh, this is kind of like dragging?
Can we take a quick break real fast?
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry, just give me 1 sec.
No problem. Actually, you know what? I'm just gonna pause it.
Okay.
And then yeah.
All right.
All right. Hey, what's up, guys? We're back. So so I was asking you about like the attention span thing. Because of social media and all that, do you feel like your attention span has gotten like worse with movies, or just in general with movies? Do you feel like that's kind of like an issue for people?
Honestly, yeah, and I think that's a big part of the reason why it's good to see movies in a theater is because, you can't pause it and just go do something else for a minute. You can't like look at your phone and scroll on TikTok, you know. I mean, I guess you could, but most, you know, decent people would not. So yeah, especially when you have those big run times. And that's one thing I may think maybe hurt something like All Quiet on the Western Front, because it's a 2.5 hour movie that is all subtitled and is really depressing, and you kind of just it's kind of a slog to get through. I think that sometimes not all movies that are 3+ hours or 2+ hours are created equal. I think that something like, for example, Avatar: Way of Water, despite it being over 3 hours long, it really, and just kind of not a lot happening for a lot of the movie, it really moved it a clip for me, and I was really engaged and interested. And I think if you are able to kind of keep your audience's interest, you know, that's going to make it so much easier. But every movie is different. You have stuff like Skinamarink, which is just like there's portions where like just you're looking at a black screen for like a minute straight. Um, but yeah, I do think our attention spans have really been hurt by social media and, you know, 30-second TikToks and everything when you have to sit down and pay attention to a very long film.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of people say that that's kind of like a problem with the youth or whatever. I'd say every generation says that about the youth, where, you know, they're gonna, you know, first it was books, and then it was movies, and then TV shows, and then now social media. But I kind of question, I mean, obviously having a bad attention span like is bad, but I almost kind of like wonder, like, is it? You know what I mean? It's kind of like,
Mhm.
I feel like we're like you kind of like we're kind of like living in such like a fast paced society that it's like you almost have to kind of like, not like you have to, like I don't think being in like a rush all the time is a good thing, but I don't know if like, I don't really know if like necessarily like reading a book like makes you like necessarily like a better or smarter person than like just like reading Google or something, or like, you know, like, I mean,
Mhm.
obviously if you're just swiping away on like pointless TikToks or Instagram, but like YouTube, for instance, just has like ton of like good quality information. I don't know if like watching a 3 hour movie is like really any necessarily better. Like, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, no, you're right, because there's like even something like TikTok. There's plenty of really amazing stuff that I've learned off of just like, you know, 3-minute TikToks, where it is someone who is a scholar just talking about whatever it might be, or something that is just very entertaining. And there's a lot to be said about shorter movies, and I do. It is nice when you go to a movie and you're like, oh wow, this is only 90 minutes. This is awesome. So it's not like, I think that especially with the Academy, they tend to treat movies that long equals good. That's not necessarily the case. One of my favorite movies from last year, it's same director as Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Her follow up to that, it's called Petite Maman, and it's a 70-minute movie, and it's really good. It's like you just get in, you watch this movie, and you get out, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's nice to sometimes not have that obligation.
Yeah, I'd say why, you know, why watch it for 2 to 3 hours when it
Mhm.
could be done in less, really. I mean,
Yeah.
but as far as like the future of movies go, like a lot, you know, at some point some people said that, you know, theaters might be dead. It looks like they're probably not going to be dead, but what do you think is going to happen with the future of movies? What do you think it's going to look like?
It's really hard to say right now because yeah, like we've been saying, like I think what I think is going to happen honestly is that streaming is obviously very important, and but we're never going to really lose theaters. And what I think is going to happen is that the theatrical window is probably going to get a bit shorter and things are going to become available on streaming. And I think that that's not necessarily a bad thing, because things like, I'll give you a good example, in Kanto, movies like that really find a second life. In Kanto, it came out in theaters, it did not do well. 30 days later, it got put on Disney Plus and it exploded. It became hugely popular. And that is one way for, I think that, you know, when movies come out in the theaters, they don't make the box office that people are expecting. That's a way for them to kind of live on and get seen and to kind of recruit some of those losses. Um, on the other hand, you have something like Top Gun Maverick, which was supposed to come out, I think, after 45 days or whatever, onto Paramount streaming service, but it kept making more and more money at the box office. So they said, you know what, we're actually going to keep this just in theaters. It's going to be a theatrical experience. So I think it is going to become in the future a very case by case thing where theaters are going to or studios are going to work with theaters to be like, all right, we're going to have you're going to get exclusivity on this one because it's doing really well, but this one hasn't really hit, so we're going to take it off. And it's probably going to be a lot more complex than that, but that's just kind of like the boiled down version as to what I think is going to be kind of the model of the future.
Yeah. Do you think VR is ever going to get implemented into movies?
I don't know. I don't see that really happening. I know that that's been something that I've been trying to bring on for a while. Maybe it'll catch on to some, as some kind of gimmicky way, but I think that's going to be like the 3D TVs where it's like if it ever does hit, it's going to last for like a couple of years and then people are going to realize it was a flash in the pan.
Yeah. Yeah, it almost seems like VR with meta or whatever. I don't even know anyone like using meta. Do you?
Yeah, no,
like
I
do you
do
think
not.
it's just I wonder if that's just gonna like sync Facebook or Meta or Mark Zuckerberg or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what was I gonna ask about? Oh yeah, what did you think about well, Encanto was like, it was like an animated one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what did you think about Bardot? Or did you watch Bardot? The
Oh, the Inarritu movie? It's got like the
yeah.
long. I didn't watch that. It seemed very pretentious to me. I kind of thought about watching it, but it just seemed like I heard a lot of mixed, not great things about it, and it honestly, I just never put aside the time to watch it.
Yeah. Did that one get nominated for anything? Do you
It
know?
didn't get nominated for anything. I don't think it got a single nomination, honestly.
It was just like too weird. Well, I mean, that dude, like you say, it's pretentious, and I see why you're saying that. But I listened to him actually on like a podcast, and he comes off like really genuine, and like he kind of just said, this is like what I wanted to do. This is like my vision or whatever. And
yeah,
I mean, it's like, obviously I don't think it's for most people. Like there's no real through line of the movie. It's just kind of like abstract. But I mean, The Revenant, the fact that he does Birdman, The Revenant, which I wasn't even like huge into Birdman.
I love Birdman, but I think it's very pretentious.
Yeah. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I liked the movie, but it's weird. And I like weird, but then Revenant was awesome.
Yeah,
Revenant, even though that
was
was
great.
another one.
That's
that was
great.
long too.
Yeah. And I think I'm just kind of also, I don't need to see any more movies because there was a lot of them this year, particularly of like directors reflecting on their childhood. And I know I talked about The Fabelmans a lot. That was probably the one of those that I thought was okay. I don't need to see any of these directors like Apollo 11.5, and I know it was last year, but Kenneth Branagh is one of those. Like I don't need to see the
what
director.
was that one? That last one you said?
Oh my god, it's the Kenneth Branagh. It's Belfast.
Oh.
I really did not care for that movie. So yeah, I just I'm kind of exhausted by that like specific subgenre, to be honest. And I know that comparing those, they're very different tones, very different styles, even genres of movies. But I don't need to see that anymore. I only watched Fabelmans because I'm like, if anyone deserves a victory lap, it's Steven Spielberg. I'll give it to him. But that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, would you even call it a victory lap? Is, like I said before, like, even though he seems like he's kind of been, laying low or whatever, like he still is. I think he still comes out with movies, a good amount of movies, right? Like he came out with West Side Story last year, I think, right?
Yeah.
And then what else has he done recently? Like
honestly, I haven't loved a lot of his stuff before West Side a lot of his 2010s output. He did like the BFG. He did Ready Player One, which I do not care for. Before that, Lincoln, which was solid. It was a good movie. War Horse, which I actually like a lot. Tintin. So
I don't even know if I know of like War Horse. Which one was that?
War Horse I think is a pretty underrated movie. It's based on a play. It's just basically about a horse in World War One that kind of goes from different, like it's you follow the horse and he just goes from different, like here it's at like now it's at the German lines and then it's at the British lines, then it hangs out with like a French girl on her ranch, and it's kind of just follows. It's a just kind of like the horse kind of Forrest Gumps its way through World War One almost.
Oh man, I don't even think I heard of that. Yeah. So what about like the Safdie brothers? Are you into like
I like
those
Uncut
guys'
Gems a
movie?
lot. I haven't seen a lot of their stuff, but I do. Uncut Gems, just in anxiety, pure anxiety that movie is.
Yeah. Did you see Good Time?
I didn't see Good Time yet. It's on my
That was
list. It's on my
that
list.
was yeah, that was an interesting one.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about weird. Well, with Uncut Gems, like I've talked to other people about this and they didn't seem to agree with me, but and it's like, I think when I watched, I literally like torrented it or something. But it was
Mhm.
like, even though I don't know, I have no, well, I don't, it wasn't on Netflix at the time, but it was like really like noisy. Like, did you like it was like the sound, and I think it was intentional, but it's like they'd be having a conversation, but you could like literally, and I think this was a thing. You could like literally hear like the background kind of like
Mhm.
noise. Did you notice that in the
I did
movie? Like,
not. I mean, there's sound mixing is like it's really interesting, and the way like sound mixing is really bad on a lot of streaming services. And there's this really interesting video that I would recommend anybody look up. It's by a friend of mine, got interviewed by Vox, my friend Austin Kendrick. Um, and she's like a sound engineer, knows a lot more about that kind of stuff than I do, but explains why so many movies, particularly Chris Nolan movies, sound so bad when they get mixed down to, from they're supposed to be in this surround Dolby sound and they get mixed down to like one or two speakers on your TV, and why that really distorts it, and why you have to like barely hear the dialogue. You have to turn up the dialogue scenes, and then like the action scenes come on, you have to turn it way back down. So yeah, sound mixing's tough.
yeah. And then what about like but yeah, like with that one, I think it was a different issue. I think that they
Mhm.
did it I think I even heard that they did it intentionally. Like they're intentionally trying to make you feel like anxious, and it's like
Okay. And
by
yeah,
hearing
probably,
all
yeah.
these like noises. Yeah, I don't know, I think. But so with the dude, what about the guy who did, like, he did Men last year, I think.
Alex Garland. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a very, very big fan of his. Actually don't like Men at all. Like that movie really was like didn't work for me. I think Alex Garland falls into the trap that a lot of writers do, a lot of great screenwriters. Like I was talked about earlier, how screenwriters basically, despite being the main creative voice on a film, have almost no power and no recognition. And he was a screenwriter for a while. He had a really great collaboration with Danny Boyle. They wrote 28 Days Later, they wrote Sunshine, and then he and I think he just realized he didn't have enough power, and he, like so many screenwriters do, your people like, even going back to the old days, Billy Wilder, or someone like uh uh Andy Kaufman, uh, like they write these movies, and then they're like, you know what, I got to direct so I can really see my vision done. And I think he's a good director, but he's not as good of a director as he is a writer. And his movies that he's directed have been really good. But the movies that he's written and let Danny Boyle direct have been just immaculate.
Yeah, for sure. Because yeah, I've noticed that too. For some reason, when you said Andy Kaufman, I was thinking of the comedian, but Andy
Oh wait,
Kaufman,
sorry, not Andy Kaufman. Uh,
I
uh,
know who you're talking about. He did like Eternal Sunshine
yeah.
and all that. Yeah. He wrote it. What's his name? Do we know?
It's like my favorite director. He just gave that amazing speech at the WGAs, and I'm so tired. I'm like forgetting everyone's name tonight. Let's
Yeah,
see here.
if you want, we could wrap it up soon. Do you want to wrap it
Okay,
up
yeah.
soon? Yeah. Because I actually only have 10%. It just showed me. So yeah, Eternal Sunshine is amazing, but like you said, well, did you see his last one?
Oh,
The weird
yeah,
one on Netflix.
yeah. I actually really liked that. I dug that movie a lot, to be honest. That it was I'm thinking of anything's really, really weird, just kind of surreal. Charlie Kaufman. Charlie Kaufman.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I dug that movie. And I think Jesse Buckley is one of the greatest performers that we have.
Oh yeah, she was great, and she looks totally different in men, like almost
Yeah, yeah, and yeah,
unrecognizable.
yeah, definitely. And I think that I being a film critic, I or just being a very big fan of film, I there's a lot of things you catch in I'm thinking of ending things, especially on like a second or third go where somebody like you see on her bookshelf a book by Pauline Kael, who is a very famous film critic who was famously very hard on a lot of movies. And then later on, when they're having that conversation in the car and she's kind of ripping apart, I forget what movie, but some movie it is. I was like, this sounds like a Pauline Kael speech. I've got to look this up. And I look it up, and sure enough, it is a Pauline Kael, like verbatim quote. And so there's a million, and I'm sure I'm missing most of them, but that movie has all these just really weird Easter eggs. And I love movies that like you have to think about. And I could see people seeing that one and being like, wow, this is just subverting to subvert. But to me, it's subverting to actually say something.
Yeah, and like I didn't know what was going on while I don't know if you knew what was going on while you were watching the movie, but I didn't really understand what was going on. It was really well directed, actually. Like some of the scenes that were probably really hard to shoot, like where they're driving in the blizzard or whatever. But afterwards when I looked it up what it was about, I was like, okay, that makes sense. Like it totally tracks. But yeah, I actually saw Alex Garland on a he was actually on like Lex Friedman's podcast.
No, I'm not familiar with it.
He's kind of like a Joe Rogan guy, but it's
Oh,
like
okay.
his podcast is more like scientific and stuff. He had Alex Garland on, and he's a super interesting guy. Like,
Mhm.
so I tend to like people better when I hear them interviewed, and I'm like, oh, this guy's actually like a really smart guy. But yeah, so in terms of speaking of Alex Garland, I feel like there's a whole new wave potentially, or there has been with like Ari Aster and like Hereditary and like The Witch, Robert Eggers, of like horror movies that are like kind of like really well done. Would you agree? Like on a lot of the A24 horror movies are like really well done. I
Yeah.
feel like it's kind of like creating like a whole new genre of like just really well done horror movies.
Yeah, honestly, I think that because growing up, I was never a big fan of horror movies, and I think a big part of that is that horror in the '90s was not great. Horror like was just a lot of slasher sequels, just movies, like Friday the 13th Part 10 or 9 or whatever, and then Jason takes Manhattan and Freddy comes back from the dead or whatever it might be. And then once you have Scream come out and kind of deconstruct that. I think that following that, horror starts to get really interesting again, and particularly starting with the 2010s with the rises of your stuff like A24s or your people like Jordan Peele showing up on the scene. Horror starts to become much more cerebral, which is the kind of horror that I really like. That just it's not about just jumping out and scaring you. It's about being like, no, what's that in the corner? Oh my God, is that Toni Collette on the ceiling? What the hell? And she's just sitting there. That's the kind of horror that I love, and it's really had a big resurgence or in the past probably 10-15 years. And yeah, companies like A24 that are making these movies for a much smaller budget are a big part of the reason for it. Blumhouse, I should also mention Blumhouse, also incredible with the resurgence of good horror like that.
Yeah, and that last one, I don't know. I think it was Blumhouse. The one with like I'm forgetting the name of that too. But Barbarian was actually like a pretty good horror
Yeah, I
movie.
like I like the first half a little bit better than the second half of Barbarian. But I definitely appreciate that movie. And with Blumhouse and A24, something they're both able to do is because they make these movies for such a small budget, when one hits and they made a movie for $1 million and it ends up making $50 million, it doesn't matter that they had 10 other movies that didn't really hit because they just made 50 times their budget on this one and it paid for all the other ones. So the fact that they like Smile, which was made for a very small budget, made like $100 million, or I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but something like that, they could just do that. They could just try a lot of weird, interesting stuff. And it's not like something like a Marvel or like, whatever, like Paramount or these companies that every one of these movies has so much money spent on it that they have to be a hit because they are all these small budget movies. Some of them can fail, and when the ones that succeed do, it makes up for it.
Yeah, for sure. And I was talking all the crap on Marvel earlier. It's like I do think that those movies are obviously well done, well directed,
Mhm.
well acted, everything. But yeah. Um yeah. So I would probably say that like I don't know. I might say that out of all the new for some reason I'm like really obsessed with like really into like directors. I think it's because I guess that would be like my ideal one of my ideal goals is to be like a
Mm.
director. But I might say that Ari Aster might be like the best up and coming director. Are you looking forward to like Beau is Afraid? I'm kind of a little bit bummed out about that movie that it's like not horror and it like looks kind of psychedelic. Have you seen the trailer for it
I
with like
haven't seen the
Joaquin
trailer.
Phoenix?
I try not to watch a lot of trailers, but I I do love Ari Aster. I love Hereditary was great, and then I love Midsummer. But I think a lot of it's. I'm always interested when a lot of horror directors, because a lot of our greatest directors started off as horror guys. Peter Jackson, Sam Raimi. They're these guys who start out with making these kind of low budget, interesting horror films, and seeing where they go from there is always really cool. Even Jordan Peele was a comedy guy and then he became a horror guy. Even Nope, while it still is kind of a horror movie, is more of a big budget action movie. It's a lot like Jaws. Um, so I'm really curious to see what he does next because he's following in the footsteps of all these guys who have started with horror because it's a really good genre to start with when you're starting being a director, and then kind of moving on to some more interesting other things.
Yeah, like one thing I'll tell you about that one is, and you probably don't want to know too much. I won't tell you, but like what happens. But it's like it's definitely not what I expected from him. It looks kind of like trippy or something.
Mm.
But yeah, so I'll end it on the last, or one of the last questions here, real quick, and you can answer as quickly as possible. I actually wanted to ask you about this earlier and go over it more in depth, but feel free to answer quickly. Is like when reviewing movies and stuff like that, what are like some of the main points that you're looking for? Like something that I can like kind of keep in mind when I'm watching a movie for is what's good and what's bad type thing.
I mean, honestly, I think that you just the main thing is like you're looking at what is this movie saying? What is the point of this movie? Like, what is it trying to communicate to me as an audience member, and in what ways is it doing that either effectively or ineffectively? I guess is the very short answer for that.
Okay, yeah, and that's a good short answer. And then as far as the differentiating between the directors, what would you say are some of like the main characteristics? Would you say it kind of comes down to like just kind of like just like hard work and like obviously intelligence, but like just kind of like putting in the work and putting in the time?
Yeah, I think that that's definitely a big part of it, and it's also just experience and knowing what you're doing. I recently read Robert Rodriguez's book, and he talks about how when he's in film school and he'd been making films for his entire life on his camcorder and editing them like manually on the VCR, and he would see all of these other film students be like, "My film sucks," and it's like you have to make. He's like, everyone has like two or three bad films in them before they make a good film, so you kind of have to do that a couple times. And so yeah, it's hard work, but it's also experience and it's learning, and it's also making sure you work with your collaborators and take as much as you can from everyone else around you.
Yeah. And then did you by any chance have you seen any of like Ari Aster's like early like YouTube shorts that he did?
I have not.
You can find some of his like some of them are bizarre, but you can
Yeah.
find some of his early YouTube shorts like just and they're not great. They're not bad, but they're like not
Mhm.
great. So yeah, the last question I'll ask you is, which is what I ask everybody, but well, first of all, go ahead and plug your stuff. And I actually do want to check out your Watch Mojo stuff. Do you actually talk on those or is it just like you just write it?
So yeah, I just yeah, they have somebody do the voiceover, so I just write the scripts to those top 10 lists, but I also do the research and like gather all the B-roll and all that good stuff. So but yeah, you won't hear my voice.
Okay. And yeah, so yeah, plug your Watch Mojo stuff, your podcast, whatever else you do. And then I also ask, what are some podcasts, movies, TV shows, music that you just want to throw out there that you like? Yeah, I know you've already gone over some of them, but especially more recent stuff.
Yeah. So just to plug my own stuff, my podcast is Underrated. We talk about underrated films. It's on all the podcast apps wherever you're listening to this. You can listen to it there. It's also on YouTube. Um, some other podcasts that I'm a really big fan of, especially if you are looking for other great film podcasts to listen to. One I would say check out definitely is Beyond the Screenplay. I'm a very big fan of that podcast. I've actually had a couple of the co-hosts of that show on my podcast a couple times. They were kind enough to come on, and that was really awesome. Screen Drafts, another really great film podcast that I would recommend anyone listen to. Um, if you're looking for good films that are out right now, I would say
ideally something that I'd be interested in based on
okay,
what I like.
okay, yeah. Let me. I would say probably what did I just see? Cocaine Bear actually was a lot of fun.
Oh
That
wow.
yeah, that movie. It's pretty dumb, but it's pretty fun. There's not a lot of prestige stuff out right now. That like January, February is kind of the time of the year when they put out a lot of stuff that they know won't win Oscars. And I know we're creeping into March.
Sorry.
No,
What are you looking forward to? I guess in this year, even if it's in the future, like I'm kind of like ready to look forward to movies. You know what I mean?
yeah. Well, I mean the new Fincher film. I'm very very excited for. That's going to be coming out later this year. The animated one with Michael Fassbender on Netflix.
Oh, that's supposed to be animated?
Yeah, The Killer, I think it's called. So
Why
that's
is
going to
that?
be.
I'm
That's
kind
going
of
to be.
bummed out about that.
What is a good movie that just came out? Actually, Magic Mike 3. I love the Magic Mike movies. I love Steven Soderbergh. We didn't really talk about him, but he's one of my favorite directors. And then, you know what? I'm actually really excited for the new Indiana Jones movie that's going to come out later this year. I know people obviously had mixed feelings on the last one, but this one looks like it's going to be really well done. It's going to not be kind of doing a lot of the old jokes. There's going to be flashbacks to him as a younger man, and it's going to be directed by James Mangold. As much as I love Steven Spielberg, I don't think he's that same director that he was in the 80s. I think that James Mangold, who has made movies like 3:10 to Yuma, he's made Logan, Ford v Ferrari. And so I'm really excited to see his take on Indiana Jones and kind of the conclusion to that series.
Who's gonna be like Indiana Jones?
Harrison Ford, yeah, Harrison Ford's coming back, and
Okay.
yeah, they're gonna have do de-age. There's gonna be some stuff of him as the age he's at, but they're also gonna be doing all this. ILM is doing all this insanely good de-aging stuff. So I'm really stoked for that.
All right, cool. And then what are your thoughts? I know Shia LaBeouf was in like one of the Indiana Jones. What are your thoughts on him as like an actor in general?
As an actor, I think he's a really good, weird, interesting actor. I don't think he's like as a person. I don't know. There's some stories about him not being the greatest dude.
Yeah.
But I think that he is pretty underrated as an actor. I think he's really naturalistic and just kind of weird. And there's John Bernthal talks about these stories about how much he respected him after working with him on Fury, and just how kind of dedicated he was, and he was very method, but not in a way that like ever took anything away from everyone else. So weird guy, not the greatest guy, but probably a really good actor.
Yeah. And then what do you think about X and the
X and
follow up?
Pearl, I actually didn't see them.
Yeah.
I didn't see them. I'm not a huge slasher guy, so I didn't see X. I was more interested in Pearl, but I was like, I didn't see X. I guess I won't see Pearl either.
It's better than it's better than it's a slasher movie. It's
okay.
The director did a good job, and Mia Goth did a really good job in both. Really,
did you think of that because she's married to Shia?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought of Shia as Indiana Jones, then I thought of that, but yeah. So so then lastly, TV shows, music, and then if you've already named all the movies.
So TV show, I would say right now the show that it's actually going to be, the finale is going to be airing tomorrow's recording. This will probably be out when people listen to this. Poker Face, I mentioned it earlier. The show Poker Face is really great. I know Mandalorian season 3 is coming back, so I'm interested to see where that goes. I did really love Andor. If anyone hasn't watched Andor, check that out. That's a really great show.
What's Andor?
Andor is it's the Star Wars show following Cassian Andor, Diego Luna's character from Rogue One, and it is way better than it has any right to be. It's just like really gritty, interesting, like Star Wars told from like the kind of ground level that you never see. It's really just a great show about like standing up to fascism and just how complicated and tough and interesting that can be. So I cannot recommend Andor enough. And I don't know if I have
Really
any
cool.
music recommendations. I do like music a lot. I try to go a lot of my music, but I don't think there's any bands that I really listen to that have come out with anything recently. So I'll just go say listen to the soundtrack for RRR because that's a great movie. I hope it wins best song at the Oscars. Go listen to that. And that's
What's
also
our-
gonna RRR.
What is that?
It's a Indian movie. 3 hour long, just ridiculous, over the top, bombastic epic. It's on Netflix. Unfortunately, it's not in its original language on Netflix. But yeah, just really just if you're looking for a fun blockbuster movie, it's like a musical, but it's also a war film, but it's also a buddy film. It's like everything in a movie, honestly.
Okay, and then lastly, what are your favorite Star Wars? Do you like the original three the best? Do you think those are the best ones?
Empire's the best. Empire is definitely the best. I think each trilogy has its own ups and downs, honestly. But yeah, nothing really touches this episode 5, the second one to come out.
Yeah. All right. Well, what I really think that they need to do, and if you're able to do this, then go ahead and take my idea. But have you heard of like the website Pitchfork, like the music website?
Yeah.
So it used to like really like just, you know, like really hate on like certain music or whatever. I feel like there needs to be like a website where it's like it kind of like tells you what is the most prestige TV and movies. And I know there's like Rotten Tomatoes, which is kind of like that, but I feel like if you can come out with like a website or like a podcast where like you can just get like really good ideas for what to watch basically. But I feel like it's like one thing about the internet is like it's very hard to find anything really to listen to or to watch. And that's why I always ask my guests these questions. But anyways, that's my idea. So yeah, I'll definitely check out your podcast, and then also if you can, maybe send me some of the Watch Mojo ones or whatever. It was nice talking to you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
And if you ever want to come back on, let me know. I could talk about this stuff forever.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Bye, guys.
See you.